All right. So Michael, Lara, Sylvia, Carrie, Amanda, and Justin. Can you all activate your camera? Just make sure everything's fine. So I'm going to stop my screen sharing. So all of you need to share your screen to see whether you can share your PowerPoint. Okay. So Amanda, you will be the first one. So have a look let's share screen. We are going by this order, okay? So Amanda, you will be the first presenter, and then the Justin, and then the Lara, and then the Sylvia, Michael, and then the Carrie, you will be the last one, okay? But all of you need to stay here until the end of the seminar, except Amanda. I know you are very busy. So Amanda, when you finish, you can just go. But all of your 5 students need to keep staying in the seminar room because at the end of the seminar, I think a lot of students and the parents, they might raise the questions to all of you. Okay? All right. Thank you so much. Okay, so Amanda, start from you. Okay, you start to share your screen, and then after Amanda, Justin, Lara, Sylvia, Michael, and Carrie. Okay, we try one by one. Thank you. I will make all of you as a co-host. May with as a co-host. Okay. And Amanda will be the co-host. Lara will be the co-host. Yeah. When I turn all of you as a co-host, you can share the screen and mute people, you can do a lot of things. Okay, great, excellent. So Carrie should be co-host as well. Justin will be co-host. And Sylvia, where are you, Sylvia?
Here.
Yeah, I need to see you. Can you activate your camera? Perfect. So can you just try okay. So Amanda, you should be fine. So can you just close your stop your screen sharing? Yeah. Yeah, Justin, you try. Okay, perfect, perfect. Okay. So next one, Lara. I think I already turned you as a co-host. Yeah. So you need to open your slides on your computer.
Give me a second. Like, I need to do something to my settings. It's not letting me.
Sure, sure. So maybe Sylvia try first, okay? Sylvia, do you want to try first? We cannot see. We cannot see anything yet. Okay, it's coming out. Perfect. Great. Thank you. Thank you, Sylvia. Yeah. And next one will be Michael. Okay. All good. Carrie. Yeah.
Like, give me a second. I need to quickly change it over.
Yeah. That's fine. Take your time. Is it okay, Carrie? Yeah. Showing up. I cannot see anything yet. Still black screen. Carrie, it's not showing. Can you try again, Carrie? It's black. Nothing show up. Do you want me to try? I can try to share your screen. Just give me a sec.
Okay, yep.
Yeah. Have you already open your PowerPoint on
Yeah,
your computer?
it's
Yeah,
already
okay,
open.
all right. I try this one. Oh, it's sharing. Perfect. Thank you so
Oh,
much. Okay, Lara, your turn. Perfect. Thank you, everyone. You put your thumbs up. Excellent. That's a really good way to communicate. Okay. So Lara, we are testing the last person. Lara, try your share screen. Yeah, thank you. Okay, we are
Give me a
having like
second, my app
89
is
people
being weird.
in the classroom right now. So we are going to start our seminar in next 3 minutes. So right now Lara is testing her share screen. Just give Lara a moment.
I have to leave and rejoin for like the sharing screen thingy. All right, I'll be back.
Okay. All right. Okay. All right. Okay, so Amanda, can you hear me? Yes? Right, okay, all right. Okay, all good. Okay, so let me start tonight's seminar. Okay, thank you so much, everyone. Taking such lovely Saturday night to join our academic online seminar. So tonight, the majority time we were using English to present everything to our parents and the students about how to prepare 2026 selective school entry test. So tonight we are very, very happy to invite actually we inviting 6+1 presenters. So the first presenter is Amanda. She was sitting in our 2024 class, and this year she already studying at McRobinson School, and she will share her experience about this whole year's learning journey in McRobinson. And then the other five presenters, speakers, they were sitting in 2025 selective school preparation classes with academic school. So they will take turns to show different parts about their experience and the feelings and mental preparations about this exam. And the last presenter will be one of our leading teacher, Darren. He is specialized to doing a lot of research about the trend about in the future ACER exam, how ACER exam to test all of our children. So I wish all of you can take a little notebook beside your computer and just write down all your questions, or you are more than welcome to type your questions into the chat box. And then we will take the last session as a Q&A session, and we will welcome all the parents and our students raise your questions by raising your hand or sending through your message by the chat box. Okay. So right now, let's welcome Amanda, our year 9 students currently study at McRobinson School, and she used to sit for our 2024 class for the preparation of selective school entry test. Welcome, Amanda. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. My name is Amanda, and I'm currently a Year 9 student at McRob. So last year, I was accepted to McRob after studying at EQD's Selective course, and today I would like to share some reflections on my experiences so far this year. So I will mainly be talking about some of the challenges, preparations, and things I wish I'd known before starting. So firstly, I would like to congratulate everyone and all the students who got into selective schools this year so far. And this is a huge achievement and a testament to your hard work, dedication, and perseverance. Okay. Firstly, I'd like to talk about the opportunities and experiences. So I think one of the biggest things that makes McRob so special is the sheer amount of activities that the school offers. So they offer activities that many other schools don't, and they try to cater for all likes and interests, helping students explore things and prepare for their futures. So we have had many author visits. So some of my personal favorites have been like meeting Anne Liang, or we have who come to share their experiences and give tips and answer questions. And then we have youth law opportunities like mooting, where many students, especially my friends who are interested in signing up for law, they set up students who wish to be lawyers and to experience real life courts and debating experiences. And then there are Adelaide Exchange and Adelaide Sport and Debate Exchanges, where Macrob has exchange program with a school in Adelaide. And then basically, I think it's every year that our schools do compete in sport and in debating. So we also do countless clubs that have like art club, chess club, German, extension, maths help, debating and political interest groups, which are all student run groups. And if you're interested in anything else, you can basically start your own group as well. So this year, I, along with some other friends, were selected and invited to attend the annual MAV Games Day, which is where I had some of the best and most fun and rewarding experiences so far. So MAV Games Day is a maths competition held between schools where students of the same year level compete in teams of 4. So this year was particularly special because our team achieved Macrob's first ever win in all of our years of participation in this competition. And even more exciting is my team and I were the first ever all-girls team to be able to win first place. And it was an unforgettable experience that Macrob gave us that highlighted both the spirit of the competition and the joy that we had working together. So Macrob, along with all these opportunities and stuff, Macrob also holds weekly bake stalls for fundraisers, where each class takes turn in organizing a theme and bringing hand-baked goods to sell. And so personally for my class, we organized a theme of Sesame Street, like Cookie Monster and Elmo and stuff, and we had to sell homemade cookies and biscuits and cakes and stuff. And we're raising money for a foundation. There are also many bands like orchestras and ensembles. I personally play flute in our school symphonic orchestra, as well as in our flute ensemble, and have performed in venues like Hamer Hall in the city, which I've never gotten to play before in any other school. So there are often school activities and visits. Like most recently, last Wednesday, we had a graduate doctor come in during lunchtime to hold a free seminar for anyone who wanted to listen. And there were many people who showed up, and she talked about her experiences of becoming a doctor and all the tips and answered any questions that people had. So for people interested in performing arts, we have annual combined musicals as well as annual combined plays and many student written and student directed dramas. So one of the big things about Macrob and the most unique experience in my eyes is probably the house events, because Macrob is really passionate about having a huge student-led spirit, because an annual house competition of like house swimming, house music, house athletics, and house dance and house drama. And there are so much more things because all things are student-led, from composing pieces of orchestral music for our bands and choreographing dances, picking the songs and writing and directing plays. Everything is directed and made by students. So for this, students have a lot of independence. Macrob activities and experiences are endless and vast. The opportunities from university-led programs and student-led programs are unlike those from any other school that I know of. The second point is preparation for Macrob and at Macrob for VCE subjects, because students at Macrob know how to balance fun and serious study really well, because Macrob gives students lots of guidance when it comes to planning ahead. Teachers send out VCE guides, run subject expos, and offer acceleration advice. But I recommend, especially for those who prefer long-term planning, to know roughly which subjects you may want to accelerate in. You can usually apply for 1 or 2 accelerations. So a Unit 1-2 VCE subject in year 10, which means you have to be prepared for it in year 9. You can, because these spots are really limited. Some key things that affect acceleration include your active participation in classes, your grades, and especially your attendance. So you have to maintain and keep them up from the very start of year 9. acceleration in some subjects is highly competitive, especially in maths methods. For me, at the start of this year, my focus wasn't on acceleration. So especially for maths methods. And now, because I have misplaced my focus, I wasn't able to get into methods classes. Teachers prioritize how well you understand the current topic, not how far ahead your knowledge is. So I joined the advanced maths class in EQD, and by term 2, my maths grades had improved to be infinitely better than before. This class covers topics in great depth and a faster pace, which has helped me at McRob to become better in maths and strengthen my understanding in problem-solving skills. This improvement in my maths has also allowed me to gain recognition by the teachers, which led to me being selected for the Math Games Day, as I previously stated. So even if you only end up being able to accelerate in one subject, don't worry, because there are later opportunities for you to write an appeal to the teachers if you continue to show strong results and dedication on the baseline that your attendance is very high. One of the biggest differences I noticed after coming to McRob was how independent the learning environment is. Classes move really quickly and there's a lot of content to take in. Students are quick to learn and develop really strong self-study skills to help keep up. So McRob works really hard on techniques like active recalling, which is basically trying to recall a previously learnt skill that was learnt a really long time ago to help students learn better. But in order to do this, students have to be able to study independently at home to keep up with wide amounts of knowledge and work. Teachers guide you and give you support, but you're expected to take responsibility for your own learning. You have to know how to review content, manage deadlines, and fill in your own gaps in understanding. So self-study ability has become a big part of when students take initiative to study in the library and revise classwork, fostering independence and confidence. Through this way, McRob teaches you how to learn, not what just to learn. Since starting school at McRob, I feel like I've become way more self-efficient in studies, organizing, and how to revise effectively. I found it quite easy to adapt since everyone and all the students around me are also studying independently and effectively. And for time management, unlike most other schools, McRob provides many activities. And between those, classwork, transportation, and other commitments, things start to become crowded really quickly. So you need to learn how to prioritize stuff. Like for me, the end of year exams are about to start, which means extra revision on top of weekly homework and memorization. There are clubs on, activities to participate in, and on top of extracurriculars, music lessons, and travel times, things start to really pile up. But the school tries to understand student struggles, providing handbooks and timetables and revision materials for exams. They organize something called Connect Clash, which is basically each class having a competition designed to redirect stress and bring the cohort together as a whole. So on the screen, you can see a sample timetable of these few months so far. There are many exams and tests, but there are also many days of school off. And in the light green, you can see excursions and presentation nights and activities. So at McRob, you learn how to manage stress and time. And coming to McRob, I've developed a really strong self-drive that allows me to keep up with schoolwork, enjoy extracurriculars, and join in on all the school activities, or at least as many as I can do. So some advice and closing remarks would be for anyone who might be starting at McRob soon, I would say try to keep up your grades and attendance from the very start. They are important and can affect your leadership roles, your acceleration, and your overall impression a lot later on. You have to build connections with teachers early. This will help you greatly. Try to actively participate in classes, raise your hand, ask questions, and allow the teachers to know who you are. Every student has things outside of academics, like a big one is leadership roles. There are many leadership positions in all years, especially in year 9, so get involved early. A mistake I made was not applying for anything in year 9, but I've learned now that year 9 would be your most stress-free year out of the ones up to year 12. So to try new things, you might want to sign up for many leadership roles earlier on. So I'm not sure when the applications come out or if they have already been sent out, but try to sign up as soon as possible and try to be unique. Add emojis, pictures, graphs, and highlights. Because a difference I've noticed from this school and my previous schools in applications, my old schools had very strict application processes because they were chosen and read by teachers. In McRob, all application progresses, interviews are held by students. So you have to make them fun and appealing for a student eye. Because every student at McRob tries to distinguish themselves because making a good impression really matters. So I want to say congratulations again to all those who have passed this year's exams and good luck to those taking them next year. If you see me around or want to talk, you can feel free to contact me through Mandy. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. Thank you so much. Like this year for Amanda, just super busy at McRobinson, not just because of normal curriculum of study, but also a lot of extra curricular activities. So thanks again, Amanda. So you can have your time, have your dinner, and just go ahead for your homework. Okay. But don't forget to have some nice relaxed time for yourself. Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you. All right, so next speaker will be Justin. This year, Justin is a year 8 student, and he is currently studying at a very good top range private school. But also he has received a top school, selective school offer. So right now we just welcome Justin to have a nice speech for us to show us why he choose go for selective school from such already very high-end private school. Okay, welcome, Justin. Welcome.
My name is Justin, and I am in year 8 this year, and I currently go to Yarra Valley Grammar. Tonight, I'll be talking about my experience during the selective school preparation and my decision of private school or public school. At the start of year 7, I was an ordinary kid that did not give my best efforts at school, resulting in mediocre school results. Even with the scolding of my parents when I did badly in school, I just shrugged it off, thinking it was not a big deal. Then I realized why they wanted me to study harder in school the following year, the selective school exam. It was not until mid-January that I got introduced to the selective school exam. Realizing there could be something to prove, I began to take notice of it and study harder at school. Then, midway through April, is when I joined halfway through the academic selective school program to prepare me for the exam. What did this program do? The academic program was a vital step in me being successful in the selective school process. It provided me with clear teaching, a combination of useful homework, and interactive classwork, which accelerated my comprehension. When I would submit homework, for example, writing, I would get constructive feedback from my teachers. Just like that, my writing would gradually but effectively begin to improve week by week. For math classes, I learned many small concepts. If it wasn't for the academic program, I would not know these detrimental concepts right now. Knowing these really pushed me ahead in day school even more. Coming up to the exam, we even did many mock exams in test conditions to prepare us for how the real exam would be. I feel these really got me to understand time management well, which was vital for the actual exam. We had multiple mock tests, and I felt that each one gave me more and more confidence about the real exam. What I did to catch up joining the academic program late. I joined the academic program halfway through when everyone was well and truly on track. For subjects like math, I had to catch up on specific topics by doing extra exercise, leading to me feeling super tired, staying up all night. But in the end, after only about a week, I caught up and was following the class topics again. For English, my writing only began to get feedback halfway through, so I had a lot of ground to make up. But with extensive help from writing tutors, I caught up. Just with an extra week of hard work and dedication, I made 10 weeks of writing progress. That is when I began to utilize every optional study material that would be put on the portal, to try and further improve my abilities and preparation for the selective school exam. How my learning habits developed and improved. Not only did the program give me a variety of study options, this program also taught me a lot of self-independence as the course contains a lot of optional work. Completing this extra work really helped push me ahead. Self-independence means doing more work than you should be doing without the need of others to remind you. The academic program also taught me discipline, to work hard and with intention in what I'm doing. Working with intention allows your brain to remember more things. With all these new learning habits, I was no longer relying on my parents to make me do my homework. This carried on after the exam, where in school I would revise and give my best efforts in tests, resulting in way better grades that had seemed just unaccomplishable just a year ago. This is a close example to what I would use for my preparation. I would have a weekly homework chart that showed what I had to do for each subject. So this teaches me organization and self-independence. I strongly recommend you guys use something like this. How I prepared leading up to the exam. I prepared more and more coming up to the exam as I became more and more aware of the time frame I had left before the exam, leading to me to do lots of practice papers and written essays. A key element that I made sure to use throughout this time was time management and how long it would take me to do a certain paper or writing. As on exam day, the time permitted is very strict and difficult to manage for many. So by practicing with a timer really helps get you mentally and physically prepared. I strongly recommend this as soon as you start doing practice papers. Another thing I did in preparation for the exam, in the writing part, was note down key phrases and literary devices that could be handy in the exam and revising over them, allowing me to have a phrase to put into my writing when I'm stuck or in need of a strong line that can catch the attention of the marker. The same can be said about narrative writing, where I would have strong similes and metaphors thought out so it could be used or modified in the exam. Here on your right, I wrote down many metaphors about emotions that could be applied in the exam or modified in the exam. This can help you save more time in the writing and think more about your plot. How I prepared leading up to the exam mentally. Mental preparation before the exam includes good rest. Sleep was a priority, especially the week before the exam. Without enough sleep, focusing and studying throughout the day would be much more difficult anyway. So I strongly recommend everyone to have a consistent sleep schedule immediately. My experience during the exam. On the day of the exam, I definitely felt the pressure to perform, but was also proud of how far I had gotten with my learning. Realizing the academic program and my own studying has heavily improved my capabilities and study habits. I managed to focus well on the test and to not overthink. When I believed I had messed up, I would just continue onwards. I also ignored my surroundings, blocking out distractions that could have been caused by other students sitting the exam. I felt that during my test, I started off pretty well, with a few errors now and there that could discourage me a bit. But knowing that the test could have been hard for everyone, I continued to give my best efforts, hoping for success. Now, why did I decide to go to a public school instead of a private school? Well, first of all, the decision was ultimately up to my parents if I went to Yarra Valley or Selective school. But I ultimately realized that I could have a better chance of becoming classmates with more diligent people, as they all put in the hard work to get into a selective school. Choosing to work with peers that are probably more hardworking makes you feel the necessity to work harder. This can reflect when I was in year 7 and I was at Yarra. My friends would not get as alright as grades as me, so I felt that I was ahead and didn't try to push ahead, even though my grades were only mediocre. But after realizing how many people worked hard to get into selective school, I began to work harder and harder. And now I want to continue on with that habit throughout my learning journey. So therefore, I chose to go to selective school for next year. How the selective school exam process impacted my learning journey. The exam was not only being about competitive and proving to yourself and others that you are capable, but more about learning to be self-independent, being diligent, and having genuine care for learning. Those who progress the most are the ones who work the hardest. This can reflect my experience, as I believe the exam allowed me to notice the importance of school and working hard to achieve goals. Now, I always give my best efforts when I'm doing something, as I will never forget the time that the selective school exam changed my view of learning. And that is my experience of the selective school exam. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Thank you, Justin. I can definitely feel you prepare for this presentation very well. Thank you so much. And I do wish, like, a few years later, when you turn around, you will be very proud of your choice today. Okay. All right. So, I believe everyone already realized, like, right now, the writing section, it's really, really important for any whatever, scholarship exam or selective school exam. So, our third presenter speaker, Lara, she had received amazing result for her writing part for her ACER examination. So right now, let's welcome Lara to make her speech to show us how can you improve your writing. Okay, Lara, welcome.
This is my slideshow of like my process when I was preparing for selective school. So some context, my name is Lara. I'm currently a year 8 student at CLC. I first wanted to apply because my parents said they would give me a shopping spree on a holiday. I tried out for Macrob in Nossal and I got into Nossal, which is the school I will be attending next year. I got 2 averages in math and English, 2 above averages in verbal and quantitative, and 1 superior in writing. My study routine, this is what my study routine looked like. So I'd wake up at around 6:30, and after I'd got ready, I'd like tried to cram in some study at 7. And then after school, I would study. I go straight to the library and I start studying because, like, the flow of school and working would like help me also work like after school. I like I worked in the library because it helped me when other people were there. So I wouldn't doom scroll as much because people were looking at me, like people could see me, and I wouldn't want to be seen as a slacker. I studied like 3 to 6 hours a day. Every day I focused on one subject to not disrupt like flow instead of going from English to math and then writing. Your brain's like on different modes, but if you have one subject, it's all on the same like mode. I avoided distractions by having a minimalistic study space and giving like my devices to my parents. And at the end of the week, I would buy stuff like either from my canteen or like Coles to reward myself. So my brain would like keep motivated. Some challenges I faced study-wise was to stay focused, balancing school, study, and social life, procrastination, and running out of time to do homework. Test-wise, time management was super hard. There was also a lot of stress, consistent speed, accuracy, and pacing throughout the test. How I combated these challenges, like for attention span, I kept my workspace clean because I have a really low attention span. So if I don't know, I have a hairbrush on my table, I'd spend like in the middle of studying, I would pick up my hairbrush and just start brushing my hair for an hour or something. And also I would put like a random time limit on my phone. Like I'd close my eyes and put in a time limit. That was a bad idea, but it kept me focused. Balancing life, I would try to finish my schoolwork at the library, and then if time permitted, I do EQD work. And then like social life, it's kind of hard to balance it with everything else. So you might have to give up that for a semester, which is okay. Procrastination also a really big challenge for me. So how I combated it was like I broke big tasks into little to-do lists, because even just like ticking off check like boxes, it gives your brain like satisfaction because you finished something. And if I was running out of time to do homework, because EQD provides a lot of like good materials, even though they provide a lot, they provide good materials. I would batch tasks, which is starting off with the easiest homework and then working to harder homework. And I also do Parkinson's law, which is, say I want to clean up my room. I think it would take 2 hours to clean up my room, and I reduce that time by 10 to 20% to like finish homework. For time management and accuracy, I think the main thing is just practicing, like practice, just non-stop practicing. Like there's no other way. And for stress, like for the day before the test, I think taking the day off and doing no work is really helpful. And also staying active is super helpful because it's scientifically proven to give you dopamine, which helps you relieve stress. How I stay motivated, because motivation was a really challenging thing for me. Like I remember, I think a few weeks before the test, there was like a sleepover that I couldn't sleep over at, and that made me really sad. And I told my mom I didn't want to do the test anymore. She was like, okay, fine. But then a few days later, I was like, okay, I'm going to do the test again. So things I did was like, I kept reminding myself why I wanted to get in. And I got a lot of encouragement from my friends, family, and people that got in, like McGrob and also online, like saying, oh, the McGrob test is not that hard. Just got to try hard. And also, I selected like weekly goals, and I would get myself like rewards if I achieve them. And I'd track my progress across tests to see my improvement, and that would make me pretty happy. And having a study buddy is super helpful. Like, for example, if you're studying and you start getting distracted, like doom scrolling, they just say, lock in. It's just really helpful to have a study buddy because you two can rely on each other. Yeah. Talking to someone about your stress is also super duper helpful, whether that's like a religious figure, family, or friends. Like talking about your problems is a really good way to relieve stress. Advice for just in general that I wish I knew before. Like prepare as early as possible. Like if you're watching, like for all the people that are watching this right now, if you're thinking, oh, I don't know if I want to go for the test, I think you just go for it. It's better just contemplating it than no, it's better like just going for it instead of contemplating it. Because even if you don't get in, you're gonna be the smartest that you've ever been in your life. Like if you really lock in. Also you want to get as much sleep as possible, because sometimes I would have late nights just studying, and I would take in the same information, like compared to if I studied normally because of how sleep deprived I was. And also like if you're one of those people that like plays games and stuff, especially like during, if you know, like a Grow Garden Prime, like you just don't stay up, just maintain a sleep schedule, and yeah, it'll really help. And also disconnect from time when you're studying, because if your brain thinks, oh, we're nearly done, 5 minutes until we're finished, 10 minutes until we're finished, your brain is too focused on the time. But instead, if you keep all the clocks and time away from you, it helps keep your mind off time. And some motivation I gave myself was every second you spend distracted, someone dumber than you is becoming smarter than you. And that made me really sad, and it made me want to lock in more. Some advice for writing, because it was the only subject I got a superior in. you should put markers on time, like say you're quicker paced at persuasive, you should spend, because the test was 40 minutes for writing in total, you should spend 25 minutes on narrative and 50 minutes on persuasive if you're better at persuasive. And then you should separate it into 3-minute increments or something like that. Say 3 minutes for each paragraph in persuasive. Listen to advice that EQD teachers give you because it's super helpful. And I didn't really do that for a while. Like I would just look at my score and go, darn it, I lost like 10 marks. But I think the advice because they're actually like really smart people, like the EQD teachers. So you should listen to their advice. We should read because it expands your creativity and knowledge of words. I can't lie, I didn't finish a single book during semester 1, but I've heard that it helps a lot. And practice is really super useful. And other than that, I have no idea how I got a superior in writing because my persuasive was really messed up. It was introduction, main body, rebuttal, conclusion, 4 paragraphs in total. So I think my narrative carried that. For the exam day, you made it. You're gonna be really stressed, but you got this. Just pray for the best. Something I think that helped with my stress was like a quote from Top Gun: "Don't think, just do." I didn't think too much about the after effect. I was just focused in the moment, what was happening in the moment. I think the practice exams in EQD was harder, in my opinion. So I think it's really good practice to get to know, like, it's really good practice. Like, if you ace the EQD test, then you'll probably do really good on the actual exam day. Markers of time management, I already mentioned that in the slide before. And just don't stress. Just, I think the main problem on exam day is stress. And yeah, that's it. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Lara. I really like your pinky slides. Very nice. Thank
Thank
you. And actually, you talk really well today. Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, I love it. Okay, so our next speaker will be Sylvia. Okay, Sylvia, it's your turn, and you can introduce yourself and also, like, to show your experience with all the students and the parents here. Okay, welcome, Sylvia.
So I'm Sylvia. First, I'll start off with a little bit about me. So my name is Sylvia. I said that already. I'm currently in year 8, and my current school is Melbourne Girls College. It's a public school, and I'm right now I'm one of the top students in my class, and my favorite subjects are English, art, science, and food studies. So I'll say a little bit about my current school, MGC. So it's located near the Yarra River. I've been attending it since the start of year 7, and I have a nice group of friends there, 2 of which are also going to Macrob next year with me. So it ranks as like a pretty well-performing school in Victoria. And it has like a strong rowing program. And some of its values are excellence, teamwork, and diversity. And now, this is why I chose MacRobertson Girls' School and why I didn't choose to stay at my current school, even though I do quite like it. I believe that MacRob can provide me with more support and opportunities in regards to my education. And I think it would be good to be surrounded by driven and motivated, like-minded peers because it will encourage me to study harder. I also believe that MacRob will be able to cater to me better than my current school can. And the challenge will be good for me and enable me to grow and develop. For example, I play like piano and guitar, and there are a lot of ensembles there. So I'm looking forward to being able to play with other people. Now I'm going to talk about how I prepared for the entrance exam. I started at EQD around April, so I had quite a lot to catch up on. I had 2-hour EQD sessions twice a week on Wednesday and Fridays. In these sessions, I had to pay really close attention and work hard. And I bring a book that I had to write a lot of stuff in, but I learned a lot, and it really helped me. If I missed a session, I could also really easily just go into the EQD site and find out what I had missed up on and catch up in my own time. Besides from this, I also studied rigorously at home for about an hour a day. This consisted of a lot of online practice tests and just like drilling the same things like over and over again. Preparing became a really, really big priority in my life, and I had to manage my time well. In the beginning, I wasn't used to studying so much, and so it was rather stressful. And I found that I got distracted really easily, and this was a big problem in the beginning. And so I had to clear my surroundings of anything that might make me stray from my studying. I often study for about 20 to 30 minutes, and then I took a short break. I found out that there were quite a lot of things that I didn't know that my school didn't teach, and it really opened my eyes. And I learned that it was my responsibility to make sure I learned all these things so that I was as prepared as possible. So this was a bit of a challenge. These are some things that helped. Support from my family and friends was a big help. I was undisturbed when I was studying, and so everything was nice and quiet. But I was also brought food sometimes, which was really sweet. I also received a break from some of my chores, and so I was able to use this time to study effectively. Preparing for my exam was very, very important, but sleep was just as, if not more important. I made sure that I slept at least 9 hours a night. Yeah, especially since studying took a fair amount of energy. I also made sure that I set goals, really clear goals, such as what do I want to accomplish by the end of the week, like what tests they want to complete, what essays they want to have had written, and at the end of each week, I went over these things and I made sure that I accomplished my goals. Lastly, I set a good amount of time aside to eat and hydrate well, and to relax a bit at the end of each day.
If I can have to cover tomorrow morning as well.
Sorry, did someone say something?
It's okay now. I already mute parents. Yeah, it's fine. You can keep going. Yeah.
There are also a lot of resources on the EQD site, which helped a lot. Like there are so many practice tests there, and there's a lot of info. And so I went to the site regularly and just read all the things there and made good use of it. Some tips for preparing to take away are to minimize distractions, plan your time efficiently, set clear goals, make use of the EQD website, and of course, to get enough sleep. Like some people might like stay up studying late into the night, but I found that if I did that, then I couldn't focus very well, and that the things that I learned, I couldn't recall them very well. Going into the exam and during the exam, I felt really anxious, wondering whether all the preparation I had done was enough, and also scared that I wouldn't do well enough. but I was also resolved because I told myself that I had tried my best and that I just had to keep trying for a bit more. So managing my emotions was a bit of a struggle. And so here's some of the things that I did that helped. I told myself that I prepared as best as I could and that there was no use to stressing myself out excessively. If I felt myself spiraling, I would look around and try to guide myself within my surroundings so that I wouldn't get lost in my head. A common technique that worked really well for me was naming 5 things that I could see, 4 things that I could feel, 3 things that I could hear, 2 things that I could smell, and 1 thing that I could taste. Oh, and the test was also on my birthday, so but I had a nice dinner with my family to look forward to afterwards, and so I focused on this positive thing at the end of my day to keep me going. Final tips for the actual exam. If you don't do well on a certain section, don't let it bring you down and stress you out. What's done is done, and you should focus on what's in front of you. If you get stuck on a question, then move on. It's really easy to just keep concentrating on one question because you find that you can't really do it, and you feel as if you can't move on because you've already invested some time in it and you should try and finish it. But if you're getting nowhere and it feels unproductive, then come back to it later. Thirdly, don't be afraid to take a quick break, a quick breather if you feel too overwhelmed. Take a few seconds to pause and recollect yourself and just try to calm yourself down so that you can focus better. Lastly, never ever leave a question blank. A random guess is way better than no guess at all. If you find that there's still a few minutes left, but you've got quite a lot of questions left, then take the last 1 or 2 minutes to fill in any questions that are still blank. Just make a random guess and then go back to the question that you're on. So this makes sure that you won't end up with any blank questions. Thanks for reading and listening. I really hope this was helpful.
It is really helpful. Thank you so much, Sylvia. Thank you. So you can stop sharing. And I believe so far through the last 4 speakers, all the students and the parents, you already realize the time management is really, really important for your preparation of whatever kind of examinations. So right now we move to the 5th speaker. His name is Michael. So Michael will share some very unique experience about his principal review for the Melbourne High School intake. Okay, so Michael, it's your turn.
So, good evening, everyone. My name is Michael, and today I'm going to come and share with you all my experience for the Melbourne High School admission. What my presentation is going to cover, firstly, a bit of self-introduction about myself, and then how I prepared for my tests with some overall test experience, and how I prepared for the interview, some interview experience, overall tips for the interview, and finally a conclusion for throughout my journey. So a bit about me. My current school is Camberwell High School. It is a public school in Camberwell, and it is a very unique school with a lot of diverse people, and I made a lot of good friends. There are a lot of great teachers. Some of my hobbies includes tennis, coding, and art. Why I chose Melbourne High? I think Melbourne High would provide me with more opportunities so that I can also surround myself with other self-motivated students, which can encourage me to strive higher. So, how I prepared for the test. I came to EQD roughly at the end of 2023, I think. And before that, my writing was really below average, and I thought my maths was pretty good. But after I came, the tutors, the teachers at EQD gave me a reality check. I noticed that my maths was way, way too low for actual selective tests, and my writing needs a lot of improvements. So, for the teachers at EQD would often give me constructive feedback for all my tests and homework, especially for writing. I would receive a lot of feedback. Often, my page of writing would be filled with red marks and suggestions to help me improve. And for maths, my teacher and I would go over the questions I had problem with, would slowly analyze the questions, and then we would move on to other questions that are similar to this type, so that I can get used to it. Also for maths, I practice with ICAS papers. ICAS is like an examination thing, and AMC Australian Math Competition papers. Those questions I found are very useful, especially for the quantitative reasoning of the test, as they require a lot more reasoning rather than raw math skills. Also, EQD provided me with a lot of practice papers, useful resources, and of course, the mock tests. These papers really helped me to prepare for the interview, for the test, sorry, and I'm really grateful for them. Some other general tips is the revision of incorrect questions. I think it is extremely important to keep a recollection of your incorrect questions, because you could get a question wrong like a few weeks ago, and then you can do all your revision on it, and then you'll be like, oh, yes, I got this question, I know how to do it. But a few weeks later, you would come back to the same type of question, and you would be faced with the thought, what is this? I swear I've done this before. Why can't I do this again? Um, Throughout my journey, I have faced this a lot of times, and to help me, my mom gave me a massive book, and through that, I would write all of my incorrect questions from my practice test, my homework, and for that, I would write them down, write how to solve them correctly, write what I observed from the question, and then every single day before I go to my studies, I would go and revise those incorrect questions. And the next tip, as a lot of people has mentioned, is effective time management. It is so important because going into high school, especially with a lot of hobbies and extracurriculars, it is hard to fit all of them with schoolwork and the studies for the test. And my personal tip was to create a spreadsheet. And in the spreadsheet, I would have all the things that I would want to work on throughout the day. And during the day, after I finish the work, I would make a tick across my spreadsheet, telling myself that I've done it. And every single night, I would look over this spreadsheet. If I completed all my work, I would give myself like a star, just a thing to know that I completed all my work. And then when reach 5 stars, I would give myself like a little reward. And another tip is to really balance between work and relaxation, because working too much is working too much, studying too much can really burn you out. I personally experienced this. It is not a really pleasant feeling. You get all cramped up, you can't think of anything, and you just cannot continue with your studies. So you would want to fit in a lot of a bit of relaxation between work so that you won't burn out. Another thing is that it is also not good to have too much relaxation. I know a lot of my friends like to work a tiny bit and then have a massive and then work 30 minutes, then have like a 10-minute relaxation period, which this really drags your productivity down, because 30 minutes of work does not require 10 minutes of rest. 1 minute at most, 5 minutes at most. Yeah. Moving on. So this is my test experience. Before the test, I was feeling pretty confident, but also a bit nervous. I have prepared a lot for it, and I think I would do pretty well. But also, it's just the amount of people and the stress to do good that really made me nervous. During the test, I was confident for the most part, but I really needed some readjusting after some silly mistakes in the sections, which really put me off. I just took some deep breaths, thought about if this is only one part of the exam, I have to do well for the other parts, and I will still get a chance. After the test, I felt really, after the test, I felt really relaxed. I felt really relieved. Finally, this thing I've been prepping for all year has been finished. But also, you can really feel anxious about the results. Now, when the results came, I was a bit disappointed as I underperformed on writing and maths, which were normally my best subjects. So my results, I got superior for reading and quantitative, and top 20% for maths, and high average for both verbal and writing. With this result, I did not receive a round one nor round two offer, and I was pretty sad, really disappointed. Like, I spent a year doing this, but I got nothing out of it. Um, just as I was about to give up, I received an email to apply for principal's discretion, and I know that I have to do well on the interview so that I can have a chance of getting in. So this is my principal interview preparation. Um, to prepare, Mandy provided me with a sheet of questions from with the questions that were collected from years before. And for those, I won't write down full sentence responses for all of those questions. I'll only write down a few dot points, just things that are important to answer the question so that I would sound natural when I speak it and not like I memorize something. And another great thing that helped me was having a family member ask you those questions and you answering them so you would get used to how it would go and how you would respond. And another thing is learn to focus on etiquette and mannerism because they really look at you and they will think is I think the first impressions are very important, and getting a good first impression on the interviewers is very good. And after all that, I also had a practice interview with Mandy. This was extremely helpful as from that interview I found out what I was lacking, what I needed to improve on so that I could do well on the actual interview. Also, before going into the interview, I needed to do a bit more research on Melbourne High School so I could better relate to it during the interview. Now, moving on to the actual interview experience. The interview, overall, I think it was roughly an hour, and it was split into two stages. Now, group and interview. The group interviews was in groups of six with two interviewers, as in a roundtable interview. During the group interview, we were asked to discuss many real-world problems along with completing mini tasks in groups of three. Now, the questions were our opinions on the upcoming social media ban for under 16s and the traffic congestion around Australia, mainly around the South Yarra region, and our opinions on Australia's future sustainable energy plans. So, for these questions, we would we would take turns trying to answer these questions, and we would build on each other. We would have a bit of a debate whether it is right, whether someone said it right, someone said it wrong, and the interviewers, when we got really stuck, they will help to guide us along. For the mini tasks, it was the first mini task we did was more about were English and literacy. It was creating different words from a pool of letters. It is like I don't know, it was like the New York Times games with along with like Wordle connections, like spelling bee. They would give you all these random letters, and you'd have to make any word out of it. I think our group did successfully. They were like we were given 9 letters. I think we managed to make 17 words out of it, so we did pretty well. And the second mini task was to create a cuboid from rectangular prisms that will have X faces touching. So we were given 4 rectangular cuboids, and with those we have to stack them together, and they have to be and the interviewer would give us a goal. For example, we want 2 of the faces to be touching, we want 3 of the faces to be touching, 4 of the faces to be touching, things like that. Now, for the last mini task, it was to pick paper clips to try and force the other team from picking the last one. We started with 21 paper clips, and this was a pretty good brain teaser in my opinion. And we played 3 games in total, and after each game we were given time to reflect on our strategy, or how do we force them into doing it. And at the end, we found out that it is important to try and force them to try and pick on 18 paper clips, 15 paper clips, 12 paper clips. So that would guarantee them to pick the last one. So that kind of wraps up the group interview. Now moving to the individual interview. The individual interview lasted for around 15 minutes, where they asked me questions along the lines of my hobbies, my favorite subjects, my school environment, workloads, how I deal with heavy workloads, my music programs, and recent projects and achievements. For hobbies, they wanted me to really expand. They wanted me to talk about, oh, you do this, do you do competing for that? Do you do competing for this? They really want high performing students. And for my favorite subjects, they asked me to talk about a little why I like the subjects so much, and why is it so important to me. I picked maths and science, and my reason for them was that maths is really really broad. A lot of subjects interest me a lot. I've been doing maths ever like from a very young age, and it piqued my interest. For science, is that you can answer a lot of real world like questions we all had as a child. For example, why is the sky blue? Why is fire red? Things like that. And they also asked about my school environment. Are there any bullying going on around in your school? And if one of your friends experienced bullying, how would you counteract or deal with it? I said I wanted to be an empathetic friend, and I want to listen to both perspectives of the bullying, and how I would want to try to understand my friend so I can better help them. And if really necessary, then I would contact teachers or even parents. And for workloads, they asked me, how would in Melbourne High School, we would give you a lot of workloads. You will be required to do at least an hour of homework a day. How would you deal with that? And for music, they asked me, what AM are you doing any AMEB programs? What instruments do you play? So for me, I played the piano, and I do also play the violin for school. And recent projects slash achievements, I talked about this pressurized cannon me and my friends made for a science practical. And I think talking about them really showed my interest for science, for creating. And I think that is one of like the main things that made me stand out and unique through my interviews. My some of my general tips for the interview is a lot of people say this, but it is so important. It is so important to be natural and don't memorize long paragraphs or sentences, as I said before. So for each question, you would only want to like write down a few dot points, something that's important to the question, and you would try to link those questions together, link those dot points together with your own words. That will make you sound extremely natural. And also, in the group interview, you would want to make sure to make eye contact with whoever speaks during the interview. This shows your respect and shows that you're listening to them. And also, I tend to be I tend to be a person that speaks for a long time and don't really stop for other people. And this is also a thing I realized with my interview with Mandy is to give others opportunities to contribute because you don't want to be hogging the entire thing so much that the interviews would think of you differently. You want to give others opportunities to contribute so that you can further add on there to their point. Also, you want to do extensive research on anything you're going to bring up during the interview because during the group interview, they asked us a lot about our hobbies and we would have to expand on them a lot. Another important thing is try to guide the interviewers into asking questions you would like with your responses. And this also kind of links to the next point is to end with answers that have a confident conclusion. With this, you would find the interview would be much smoother and then you will find it much easier to answer because the interviewer wouldn't be asking questions that you don't expect. For example, if you're talking about favorite subjects and I bring along the points of science, I would also talk about how the pressurized cannon I made just a little bit, and sure enough, the interviewers would ask me, please expand a bit more on this pressurized cannon you made. That is my general tips for the interview. And here's time for the conclusion. My journey to admission was a very rocky one, with plenty of failures along the way. But the most important things that I have learned was how to pick myself up after failing and keep on striving. Going through my studies and principal's interview made me realize how important it is to not center my routine around studying, as a lot of people might suggest is good. During my studies, I would often burn out and not perform to my best, not only for my studies but also for schoolwork, which dragged down my grades for a period of time. Now, after the interview, I am so grateful that I pursued my hobbies, as that is what made me unique from the other students and actually allowed me to perform well during the interview. That is me for today. For me today, thank you all for listening, and I hope it helped.
So a brief introduction. My name is Kerry. I currently am in year 8 and I attend Strathmore Secondary College. My hobbies are learning a variety of topics, practicing music, and participating in sports. A brief introduction about what I received through my this year would be receiving a general excellence offer from Melbourne Grammar, but I rejected the offer. A first round offer from Melbourne High and a 50% scholarship from Haileybury. How I would prepare for the exam and how EQD has encouraged me would be to first set a target that you look forward to achieving and working hard towards, thus making it easier to accomplish. An example would be to do an hour of questions every day. A second way to prepare would be to not stop your other hobbies, for me, music and sports, because it would provide determination and it trains the brain to think in different ways. A third way would be to always write the words out clearly during every subject, no matter reading, writing, or math, so that either you can read what your own working out, or during writing when the teacher can clearly read what you're written, so they don't take marks off for being hard to read. A fourth point would be to keep a good mental attitude when preparing and for during the test, and not being disheartened by anything that life throws at you. Recover quickly and just don't be worried too much about the text. Relaxing is a key point. A fifth way would be to try out for a variety of schools because it would increase the chance of your child to be accepted into a better school from their current position. My sixth point, if my slide would change, would be to complete mock tests routinely throughout and be used to the time constraints to find new weaknesses and fix them. A seventh way would be to complete the homework on time, and if there are any questions that you do not understand, ask the teacher to understand. 8. Take notes during class and revise the topics taught during class to deepen your understanding about said topic. An example for me would be English. Before EQD, my English had always been hovering around the average extent, and I had not been overly focused in English, mostly focusing in math. After that, I would be always confused about my grades in English and how I thought I would be doing well, but I actually wasn't going to excel. So taking more notes would always help. And relating to that is my ninth point, which is not to specialize too much in any particular subject, but rather to focus on the average of the average of your subjects to ensure that your overall grade will not be too low. And it would significantly raise the chance of being accepted into a school. Okay. How to best utilize the time before the exam. A year before the exam, you would most prefer to start by learning all the knowledge covered by year 9 and year 8 because that's mostly the core information that the exam would cover. After that, you would try and study for 1 hour, learning all the knowledge, and complete a 30-minute mock test every day or at least every week in a routine to get used to the time constraints. I continued this for half a year before the exam. Then I switched around to an hour of mock testing and half an hour of learning. This is to get used to the time pressure of the exam and to mostly fix on the mistakes for the half an hour of learning. I would sometimes change it up to relax, as having a fixed schedule would sometimes make you feel more stressed, but this would be solved if you continuously practice. And by building up your effort, you will see what you have achieved in the corresponding amount of time and effort you have put in. Why is this not? All right, the exam atmosphere. When you enter the examination center, you will naturally feel nervous, but all you need to do is calm down and focus on the exam ahead of you. Go to the bathroom before the exam, even if you don't need to, and to not lose precious examination time. Read the questions clearly as you don't want to lose unnecessary marks. When on break, don't talk about the subjects that you have just completed, and instead revise about the subjects that you have coming ahead. After the exam, don't be too anxious about the results, as if you tried the hardest you could, it doesn't matter if you didn't make it, because there are still plenty of the fish, there's still plenty of the fish in the sea. Why is this working? Okay, wait. Okay. Speed. Speed is a very key point in completing the exam, as you never have enough time of it. You're constantly under a time constraint, and you need to complete the questions as fast as possible. During the English comprehension test, you have 35 questions and 35 minutes. This means that on average, you would need to complete a question every minute while factoring in reading the text. The trick to this is to always read the questions before the text so that you know exactly what to find. In verbal reasoning, you have 60 questions to finish in 30 minutes. This means that on average, you need to complete 2 questions every minute. How to complete verbal reasoning with some spare time to finish is to answer all the easy questions first that you can complete in around 30 seconds, and then come back to the hard ones to ensure that you can maximize your test score. On to math now. For math, if this would change. For math, you have 30 minutes, to complete 35 questions, which means that on average, every 6 minutes, you need to complete 7 questions to finish on time. Most questions will mostly revolve around a specific topic, whether it be probability, algebra, or so on. As long as you can identify the topic and you have studied enough about said topic, you should be able to easily complete the question. When answering the questions, it is best to write that you're working out on a spare piece of paper to prevent unnecessary mistakes and make it easier when you are double checking. When completing numerical reasoning, you have half an hour to complete 50 questions, which means that you need to complete 5 questions every 3 minutes. These questions are usually very long, and they are usually packed with unnecessary information, so the fastest way to complete said problems would be to always read the last sentence or the last 2 sentences to find out what the question is really asking about, and then going back into the rest of the information to find the key information needed, very similar to in English comprehension. And then for writing. For the writing, you will write 2 types of writing, a persuasive essay and a narrative essay. You have 40 minutes in total to complete these 2 writings. When the timer starts, first take a look at the 2 topics, then choose the topic that you believe is the easier one for you. You should be able to finish your first writing piece at around 18 to 23 minutes. Immediately begin your second piece because this is the last stretch of the exam, as normally you would complete reading, comprehension, and mathematics first, quantitative and verbal in the middle, and then finish the 2 writings last. During this phase, your focus will most likely decrease because you have just gone through almost 3 hours of intensive work. After immediately beginning, you should be able to quickly write out every plan that you have. You should be able to complete a thorough plan, create a strong structure, and then begin to write. When your brain is under pressure, complicated things will seem much easier. So even if your second piece is not as great as the first, it will be fine, as your overall mark will still be high. Why is this not working? Okay. Preparing for an interview. Make sure that you have looked at your school reports, as schools do look at them, and be ready to answer questions about your report. The 2 schools that interviewed me, Melbourne Grammar and Haileybury, have both looked at my reports thoroughly, including this year's and last year's, to ask questions and see how well you know about how your teachers view you and how your school thinks of it, how good of a student you are. Research some facts about the interviewing school is also helpful, as what they commonly ask, as Michael said, some questions relating to their school. It could be about, how much do you know about our school? Do you know some interesting historical facts about our school? And so on, so on. And answering these questions, though not all of them, because it would be a little difficult, but answering most of them would give you a huge bonus in completing the interview with a high mark because of how you understand the school, and it shows that you really care about the school. Also, a good tip would be to prepare some questions about the school to show that you are interested again and your curiosity. Do not be nervous, like Michael said. Be natural and just pretend it's a normal confrontation with your teacher and relax. This shows that you'll be more mature and that you are ready for the school. And the last point for preparing for an interview would be to be honest. This will show your true self to them and make yourself more appealing. The 2 tutoring centers I went for the selective school classes were James Ann College and Academic School. For James Ann College, the good thing is, the advantages is that it starts a year before the exam, and it's really good for preparing you for the time pressures and the time constraints because they do tests every week, and most are past tests, ACER tests. What's the other one called? I can't remember the other one, my bad. And other types of tests. Oh, edu tests, right, edu tests that the other schools tend to use in their exams. And But the thing is, the disadvantages of it is that the school fee is slightly high, and your teacher, how good your teacher is based on luck, and it might not contribute much in the last 2 to 3 weeks. On the other hand, for EQD, the teachers are very helpful. They actually care about the students more than the James and College students do. And they start half a year before the exam to pinpoint strategic parts, with Darren helping us, thank you, Darren, by working on past tests and analyzing what test parts they have done from previous years. They have great materials and actually spend time to care about the student, catering to every needs. Although it could be a bit far from your house, there are online classes as well, and you have a lot of friends to come with you and share the journey with the challenges ahead. And this is how I also recognized a lot of smart friends, intelligent friends, that I would not have else recognized along my school journey. I would like to say my thanks to Mandy for her hard work and for her helping us to understand many other schools and the academic community. Thank you to Angela, my English teacher, and for Darren, my math teacher. You guys have helped me a lot and helped me improve and understand many things. And I would like to thank my parents as well for sending me to these excellent tutoring places, as it is really not an easy task. Thank you.
Right. Yeah. Thank you, Kerry, and the other students that have already shared. So I'll just start off with who I am first. So I'm Darren, one of the selective school teachers at Academic School, and I've been working in this team for the past few years now. And what I want to talk about is the overall structure of the exam, as well as how our program might help you. And hopefully you can take away some tips, whether or not you're going to be part of our program or you're just working elsewhere or on your own. Okay. The first thing I want to focus on is the format. Okay. Because as you might know, okay, the format's changed in the last few years. And some of you that have read information online could be reading the outdated exam formats. All right. And I've highlighted in red what the changes have been in terms of like questions and timing. And there isn't too much of a change in terms of this. You can see reading, we've gained extra time, we've much fewer questions. And same thing with maths as well. We just have much fewer questions. And in writing, there's a small timing change as well. But when we get down to actually what's being tested, that's when the big changes are going to be here. So I'm going to skip ahead, but you can rewind and I'll recover these particular points again afterwards. Okay, I want to focus on adaptability and application of knowledge, because I think this is where the exams change the most as we've moved to the ACER exam. First things first, with adaptability. All right, you have to be ready that the exam format can change each year. The timing is always fixed, but in terms of like how many questions, this used to be completely fixed. Okay, that would never change. But some students might remember this year that quantitative exam lost 5 questions, and it just pops out all of a sudden. Okay, there's no guide in terms of like when that might happen. Okay, you just have to be ready for any kind of flexibility. Okay. Students need to stay calm, manage their time, and adjust confidently to unfamiliar tasks, because this applies to the questions as well, right? While in EduTest, like if you're a grade 7 right now, or maybe even younger, you might remember going through scholarship or going through SEAL class testing, accelerated learning at school. Okay, EduTest is quite a popular test, and you'll know that like the types of questions that they ask are always very similar. Okay, like fixed numerical reasoning questions, fixed verbal reasoning questions. They might change some numbers, change some words, change some names, but it's pretty much the same each year. Okay, but now you have to be ready that question types can change at a flick of a switch. Now, the other factor I want to look at is the application of knowledge. Because while the test used to be about just learning ahead, right? If you learn your year 9 and 10 maths, okay, you are well advanced in English, okay, you'll be fine in the test. Now it's more about using your year 8 knowledge in complex ways. Okay. Deeper understanding is much more important, and creative thinking matters more than just memorizing knowledge and rote learning certain topics. Now what I'll do is I'm going to move on to the first section, which is writing. Now I started off with writing because it's really important and underestimated a lot. Okay? The structure is 40 minutes where you have to write one creative, which is a narrative piece, and a persuasive piece. Okay? And you get both these topics at the same time, and it's up to you how you manage your time. Now, something commonly misunderstood, I think, is students think that if they're just good at maths, okay, they can use the maths topics to the maths sections to cover their writing. But really, the writing section is worth around double what the other sections are worth. And this is not really common knowledge. So it's really important that you practice hard and brush up your writing skills. Now, the task format and the prompt can change each year. So students have to rely on actual writing skill rather than memorized pieces. Right? You're not going to go very far if you're just bringing in memorized creative pieces and persuasive pieces. Right? You're assessed on grammar, structure, spelling, and vocabulary, but especially with ACER, the quality and originality of your ideas matter a lot as well. And like every other section that I'm going to talk about, adaptability is really key. The question formats, prompts, and expectations can shift from year to year. For example, like persuasive pieces from the first year till now, the third year of ACER testing, has introduced a lot of new little things such as graphs, quotes, and data as well within the prompt to see how well students can integrate information. And some students that aren't ready for that might completely miss out on how important this is, ignore the information, and it will really impact your score. Topics as well. Like we had a trend of social issues over the last 2 years. And then this year, it was rather about leadership qualities. And that could throw students off as well who are more used to like writing about perhaps ethical issues like animal testing or simply something about schools and social media. So for the creative writing, okay, it's traditionally been a narrative, but again, you have to be ready to adapt. We usually get a single image, and I've noted a few like little clips of past prompts. Okay, examples where we had a prompt about space, okay, prompt about cinemas, and this year we just got the 2 simple words "follow me," which was quite a surprise as well. And usually these creative and persuasive pieces are linked together. So we get a prompt with a telescope looking into space. The matching persuasive was about space travel and what you thought about that, its future. Now, how we prepare for writing is we build weekly lessons that focus on particular aspects such as learning about structure, vocabulary, or sentence structure and control. The teachers explore different narrative themes and complex persuasive topics to develop your ideas because not only are your technical skills matter, but sometimes just expanding your knowledge on certain topics that you've never thought about before will really help with just being able to answer prompts that you've never seen before. Also, we'll focus on learning exam strategies, time management, especially with how you allocate your time, as it's really up to you when you get given 2 prompts and just 40 minutes to write, as well as what examiners look for. And throughout this whole process, we'll be writing pieces week by week with feedback, detailed feedback, both online and offline. And throughout this process, if you finish everything, you would have done 20 practice pieces, which will really set you up in terms of your confidence and practice with writing. So I do want to reiterate that writing is worth around double the other subjects. So some students don't understand that if you decide to just let your writing, I guess, let it go for a bit, okay, and ignore it, doing poorly in writing is just the same as doing poorly in both math sections combined, right? So it's really important that good and thorough practice is done for this section. Now, I want to move on to the reading comprehension section, which is 35 questions in 35 minutes. So this section is the slower section, okay? The only section that you get a whole minute per question, which is still not a lot of time, but more than any other section. And the focus is on finding main ideas, inferences, tone, purpose, as well as other comprehension skills that you'll be familiar with if you've done many comprehensions before. Okay. It is slow paced. Okay. So you have more time to read, especially when you compare to the old edu test where you had 60 questions with less time. Sorry, not 60, 50 questions. But it's easy to fall into the trap of confident wrong answers. And we see that all the time where students will think that it's easy. Like this is one of the sections that many students will come out of thinking that it was easier, but getting a lot of questions wrong because it's easy to misread or misinterpret the main idea of a text and confidently get the entire series of questions wrong. Now, the text variety is a lot more varied with ACER as well. So standard texts like narratives, information texts, are common among all kinds of exams, but you'll see a much heavier weighting on things like poems, maybe plays, and actually always a comic, at least so far for the last few years. And that brings me to the visual information. That is quite popular with this exam as well. Okay, you have to be prepared for, looking and interpreting a timeline. Okay, you might be reading an ad. You might get graphs within your reading comprehension. So all of these are really important to be prepared for. And success depends on being comfortable with multiple text types and adjusting your reading approach quickly. Right? Again, the key thing is you have to really build up your fundamental reading skills instead of just, getting used to a certain question type and rote learning it. Now, how we try to prepare our students with reading comprehension, okay, the approach is on building both speed and reading depth through a lot of consistent exposure and strategy practice. So teachers will teach these reading strategies, build up vocabulary as well, which is really important for all English sections, as well as the timing. We'll practice with different text forms and all of the different question types throughout the week, and do in-depth walkthroughs in class to model the analytical thinking as classes read together and learn how to read actively. Something that's really important is doing a lot of practice. And we do have a lot of practice for the students, a lot of reading practice each week. If you were to finish all the work combined, I think it'll take hours, probably like at least an hour a day to finish, which doesn't sound a lot, but it can quickly become, don't want to say overwhelming, but you would stack up the work if you choose to cruise through a week or two. Now, moving on to the verbal reasoning. Okay, this is the quickest section with 30 minutes and 60 questions, and the focus is evaluating a student's ability to recognize word relationships, solve analogies, and make logical inferences. All right. Knowing a lot of words is really important, so having a strong vocabulary, but you need to know how to connect ideas and recognize patterns in languages and be able to reason as well logically. So it's a mix of strong vocabulary and critical reasoning. All right, I've noted some question types here, but it's not limited to just these, but word analogies, synonyms and antonyms, unscrambling words, codes, deductive reasoning, and identifying logical flaws in strengths and arguments. Now, as always, which before I jump to the next slide, adaptability is really important. Each year, we've noticed that there's a bit of a difference in the focus, but as long as you're focusing on these two key skills, strong vocabulary and critical reasoning, you should be well prepared. Right? For example, last year, there were a lot of unscrambling questions, but this year there was a new shift in focus to identifying the flaws and strengths in arguments and more logical statements than any other year. Right? So you do have to be ready and flexible towards different question types. Now, how we prepare for verbal reasoning is gradual vocabulary building through weekly exercise that also strengthen reading and writing. Right? This is really important. Vocabulary. It helps you with your writing, helps you so that you don't misread texts, and a lot of verbal reasoning questions directly test what words you know and you don't know. Step-by-step exposure to each question type to build familiarity. Now, verbal reasoning does have pretty kind of strict question types, although the focus each year can change. Now, despite that, you can still prepare for each particular question type over time and try to be as familiar as you can while still maintaining readiness to adapt. Also, we'll be doing regular practice analyzing argument structures and logical patterns, as well as developing speed and accuracy, as we do need to work through these questions really quickly. Now, for mathematics, it's a section where we have 30 minutes and 35 questions. And this section is probably the section with the biggest shift throughout the years, which is we really focusing on how well you can creatively apply your year 8 knowledge now. You used to be able to just learn your year 9 parabolas, you learn your sine, cos, tan early, like a year to 2 years early, and you'd be ready for the exam. But now you really have to focus on what you've learned, okay, at school. We do have to be a little ahead though, because you have to finish year 8 before your exam. But other than that, it's really about how you apply this knowledge. And if you've done like external exams before, like Olympiad, Maths, AMC, ICAS, you're probably going to be used to this kind of question type, but there are some distinctions between the two. I'd say the main ones are the speed. Okay, usually with questions of this level, you get a lot more time than 30 minutes, 35 questions. Okay. And also, you don't actually need any kind of external formula knowledge, although that can be helpful for certain question types. So the main focus is your speed, accuracy, and strategic problem solving. How well can you quickly answer to these questions, answer these possibly strange questions, and always requires a lot of reading. Okay, and your ability to connect your concepts and adapt to unfamiliar question structures. Now, the trends that we've noticed over the years is that there's been quite a strong focus on measurement throughout the past 2 years. You expect to see problems that combine multiple skills. And when I mean multiple skills, I just mean like the multiple areas of maths, especially with geometry. But again, this is very subject to change. Okay, ACER could make probability the main focus next year. So that's why it's really important that you have a good in-depth knowledge across all content rather than just trying to review past questions and past focuses. And while we're not going to go for a question like this, I just want to give you guys an example of what kind of maths we're looking at. Okay. For example, circles seem to be like a pretty big focus this year, right? A circle-based question. All year 8s are expected to know how to calculate the area of a circle. But if you're given a question like, you know, what I have in front of you here, okay, we have to find the area of the shaded region, okay, with points A, B, and C being the center of the circle, right? That's something that you might not necessarily have come across before, but you will have to know how to apply. And that's what we're trying to prepare students for by giving them like similar, well, not exactly similar, but like we're trying to extend beyond each topic so that you have the biggest chance of being able to solve a question that you've never come across before. Now, how we prepare this exam, we try to teach each core topic thoroughly. Okay, and that does include going back to basics, especially, you know, not every student has already learned all of the year 8 maths. Okay, but we ensure really strong conceptual understanding and the fundamentals. And then from there, we extend students' knowledge for advanced style problems. Okay, and then finally, we can introduce strategies for solving challenging and non-standard questions. And then hopefully from there, you're able to apply this to new questions that you've never seen. Okay, because while it's impossible to cover everything that could potentially happen in an ACER exam, you should have all the fundamental knowledge that will help you try to solve it. And hopefully you've also tried solving enough creative problems that you can apply that similar kind of creativity to new questions. And while this is really hard, so this applies to mathematics and quantitative, okay? If you're really good at maths, okay, you're usually a really good mathematician throughout the years, don't lose confidence if you can't do these sorts of questions, because it's been shown now, at least we think we've gathered enough evidence that you can get more than 10 questions wrong out of 35 and still be a superior band, like the highest band in this exam, because that's just how challenging it is. Okay, really hard questions. Usually you would expect strong mathematicians to spend a few minutes on a question like this, but in the exam, you have less than 1 minute. So it's really challenging. Okay. I want to move on to quantitative last, which over the last, maybe I would say 1 year, this was probably the hardest exam in terms of feedback from students. And it tests numerical and abstract reasoning through problem solving and data interpretation. So those of you that have done like an edu test before in scholarship testing probably have been exposed to numerical reasoning before. The main difference is there's abstract reasoning now. Again, abstract reasoning is involving problems that require more of like a visual feel rather than just like numbers. You do have to look at images and also solve problems and interpret data as well. And there's 2 points I want to make here, which is one, it's really time pressured because even though you have less questions than verbal reasoning, each question can require a lot more time because with verbal reasoning, sometimes it's a definition question. If you know the definition, you get the answer in like 10 seconds. But with quantitative, like a lot of these questions are really tough problems and you rarely get a free pass to just move on quickly. The other thing is, I want to point out that there's 45 questions again, which I did earlier. Okay, 45 questions because this is a section where the question number just changed this year. Okay, and that can happen because ACER doesn't promise a fixed number of questions, but the time is at least fixed. Okay, so you do have to be ready, okay, for a question number change. And that again comes back to adaptability. Now, essential skills for this section would be like pattern recognition in both numbers and symbol sequences, solving problems. Ratios is a great strategy for solving a lot of different problems. Interpreting numerical data, identifying trends, looking at visual puzzles that can be both like numerical based and abstract based, as well as like applying algebra as well to solve some problems. Now, how do we try to prepare quantitative? And we do try to teach all common question types and explain potential strategies you can use to solve them. However, this is not as comfortable as verbal reasoning where you can almost pinpoint the question types. Like quantitative is a lot more flexible with what kind of question can be asked, especially the patterns, like it's limitless. However, we do try to build familiarity with numerical and abstract patterns through consistent practice, right? The more you do, if you've seen 1,000 patterns, okay, you can much more quickly recall like all this, like maybe quickly cycle through 15, 20 patterns that you've seen before when you're approaching a question, rather than see a question for the first time. You've never gone through any kinds of patterns before and have to try to like figure it out on the spot, because that's the only way you're going to finish that many questions in the time given, right? And adding on to that, we're trying to train students to recognize the common sequences, which can involve, a literal sequence, like what comes next, or the odd one out. And that again is just the more you see, the easier it is to like find these differences. And the focus on this section is speed, as well as accuracy and logical efficiency. And what I mean by that is just like, again, cycling through all of the past logical patterns that you've seen before to quickly identify the patterns, as well as, strategies, because it's not all about patterns. There are some worded problems as well under these exam conditions. Now, to slowly move towards the conclusion, okay, I just want to go through our overall process, which is one, to teach these concepts, and this applies to all subjects, and that involves introducing, explaining each key concept clearly, and building deeper understanding before moving to application. Okay, then we move to online practice tasks. We do have a lot of online practice tasks, and I think these are important because they have immediate feedback. Students can put in their answers and you get an immediate explanation, and it's much better for data tracking, right? We can much better keep track of what a student's weaknesses are, what a student's strengths are, your scores compared to other students. We can compare to past students and how we know they performed at the end. But of course, the weaknesses, and this is where I think we do stand out a lot here, which is we have a lot of printed practice as most other organizations move towards pure online practice just because it's simplicity, right? Because the printed practice is really important because your real exams are printed, okay? You do have to get used to how that changes things. For writing, it's obvious, okay? Writing by hand is a lot different to writing writing online typing. But even like other things, like in a maths practice, like knowing how to use your physical paper to help you work out your piece is a bit different than having it online where you can't take notes on the paper to help you solve the question faster. And so we do offer like around half of our practice as printed practice rather than just keeping it all online. And lastly, review and refining, right? Both individual review is really important. Okay, students that do well do review their work rather than just moving online. It's not about just like cramming 1,000 practice questions. okay? But also going through it with teachers as well to discuss how to solve things better. Sometimes you get it right and there's still faster ways to do it. And that's really important as well, especially for the mathematical sections, knowing better strategies to solve it quicker. Oops. And moving on to the final part, okay? The closing remarks for me. I do want to thank everyone for attending today's session. I want to recap the fact that this current selective exam is adaptability and application. 4 years ago, I would say it's about speed and learning ahead. Okay, but make sure that we do know like the focus has changed. Okay, each section is more about how students can think critically and apply knowledge creatively while staying calm under pressure. Okay. I want to acknowledge the effort required as well, because preparing for the exam is a huge commitment, takes hours of study and practice as we lead up to the test. And our program is designed to guide and support students throughout that whole level. Now, you might have heard, and I've heard as well, definitely, some students say they didn't need to prepare much. Sometimes that's one of our students as well, unfortunately, okay? They didn't need to prepare much. And that can actually sometimes be true, okay? I would first split apart the very few students that actually don't need to prepare much at all, because that sometimes does happen. There are some students that literally don't prepare much. But for the most part, I find that people that say they don't prepare much are actually just people that have prepared a lot previously, okay? Because if you've practiced a lot, you've built up your knowledge, you've done so much practice, exams, problems, okay, throughout your 5 and 6, like a year 5 and 6 years, okay, for scholarships, you might very well be kind of ready, almost ready, and then you don't need much preparation for year 7 and 8. But I feel everyone that has gone through this and achieved results have practiced somewhere along the journey towards the exam. And finally, I just want to acknowledge the teaching team, who's very experienced and always really dedicated towards the students, trying to help each student reach their potential. And also thank all of our last year students, especially the ones that joined us here today, for sharing their thoughts and providing insights for everyone into their preparation. And whether or not you as the audience are going to choose to join our program or prepare independently, I hope that today's information session has given you a clearer understanding of the exam and helped you with some possible strategies in your own preparation. And hope that for those year 7s that are here today, that wish you the best of luck next year with your preparation.
Like, you know, you can click on the reactions and use the raise the hand.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yep, Rocky, yep.
Hi, thank you so much, Mandy and Darren. I just got a question. My kids are probably just in year 4 at the moment, but like I really ahead of myself. I want to ask, what's like which year you will recommend it for them to join the program if they're aiming for the selective schools?
Yeah, well, our particular selective program only starts in year 8.
I see.
Right? So the actual focus is year 8. Now, in the past, sometimes we've had year 7s join, okay? But for the most part, I think if you're looking to get them ready, for example, if you want them to be ready for the program, okay, that would mean trying to stay ahead of the curve, at least a little bit, right? I did mention that you don't have to like learn material a year ahead. But I think learning material a year ahead does help you with the final preparation. So I think while before year 8, it's really important to be ahead. And then once you're in year 8, that's when you can really focus on the problem solving. Now, certain classes, like for example, our normal, what I call like normal class, you know, like for example, the grade 4 maths and English class can help you stay ahead. And I think other things that are really important for like a kid in grade 4, for example, would be like signing up for the ICAS competitions each year, because that can give them a feel of like the test. Like the reading is pretty similar, and so is like the style of the maths questions, although I think it'll be harder. And also potentially even signing up for like scholarship tests, like even if you're not interested, I think like signing up for scholarship prep, not even scholarship prep, but rather like actual scholarship exams for schools can get them into that kind of environment and get them used to these exams. Because even if you look at like EduTest follows this exact test format, just with, you know, different timings, different question types, but you're still doing your writing, verbal, numerical instead of quantitative, reading, maths, right? So like these little things will help a lot for a grade 4 student, right? Especially leading into next year, because that's when you start registering for scholarships, right?
Yeah, like actually, thank you so much, Darren. Yeah, it really makes sense. And actually, we never think about this until actually we take the ICAS test, and then my kid's doing okay. So that's the only reason actually I would start thinking about this kind of thing. And that's actually how I met you guys, because my kids went to your school to attend the exam.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that's how I know Mandy get to know you guys. So that's why I thought probably worth to even just not really plan yet, but have the idea, so get to be familiar with the concept basically. So yeah.
That's a good question. Yeah, because like next year when you do year 5 scholarships, for example, that gives you a really good indication as to what your child needs to work on. If you manage to get a scholarship to a school, like so some people I know prefer the selectives just because they're cheaper than most even scholarships, right? If you get a scholarship to a school, that usually is quite a good indicator that you'll make it through selective as well, just because the exam type is similar and it shows that you're at the level that's needed. But even if you're not at the level, at least you can see the weakness is verbal reasoning or writing, right, through these exams.
No, okay. Thank you so much, Darren.
Thanks for the question, Rocky.
Thank you.
Question from Ryan.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so my son currently is year 7, and he's trying to do the elective schools exam next year. So when can we enroll this kind of a special program for year 8? Now, is starting now or?
Yeah, so I mean, for our program, you can enroll. Oh, sorry, I'll just mute you first because of the echo. All right, but for our program, we do take enrollments soon because we start in end of January. So that's when you can probably enroll around like
Start from end of January, so it's early next year.
Yeah, so we start week 1. Oh, sorry, I'll just mute you again. So we start at the end of January. So you can enroll around like December-ish. But even before then, right, if you want to look at, I know you didn't exactly ask this, but I feel like other people might be wondering, like if you want to practice right now, okay, what can you do to practice right now? Because it is important to start early, especially if you think your child is sort of on the curve, not really far ahead, okay? Then right now, some really helpful things to do could be to start learning vocabulary and like applying it, okay? Because like vocabulary, easy to work on your own, I think. Helps with verbal reasoning directly, helps with better writing, helps with understanding reading comprehension. So for the English sections, helps a lot, okay? And then for maths, like looking at just working at potential problems. So if you look at like maths competition type questions, you can like start that early now, okay? See how they're going, see what kind of weaknesses they have. But yeah, in terms of like your exact question, you can enroll like in around December-ish when it opens.
So do you have any very particular exam practice website or exam papers you recommended?
So I think what you can do is for vocabulary, like you might be wondering, where do I get this vocabulary? Probably something really helpful would be to look at SAT vocabulary, because like in Australia, we don't have as much of a focus on vocabulary. But if you look at SAT vocabulary, because America cares a lot about vocabulary, okay, you can look at these vocabulary lists that students are expected to like learn at around that year 10 level. And you can start learning those words, learn definitions, learn how they're used. Okay, that's really important as well, how they're used, because some people just memorize definitions. And then for maths, you can just look at like online, AMC papers, like some of these like are publicly available, a lot of the past practice papers, and start working on your problem solving skills then beforehand.
You mean AMC paper, right?
Yeah, because AMCs are very, very kind of just like easy to access online. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
No worries. Question from Karthik.
Hey, Darren, thanks to the team for the wonderful session and experiences as well. So my question is, if not selective, what is the alternative pathway? That is the first question. And second question, now AI is evolving, and how kids can be prepared themselves for their future studies. So those are the two questions on that.
Okay. So can I check what age are we looking at? Are we like already year 7 or?
Yes, yeah. So my daughter, she's in year five. I know it's
Okay.
too early. A lot of students, they go to private school in year seven. I'm part of West actually. So West,
Okay.
we don't have many school reputed school when compared to East. So there are very few schools like Westburn, or we need to go to Geelong for Gardenia. Like there are very less options for us in the West. So what exactly is your advice? Um,
Oh yeah. So because we're year five, I guess that can change things, because what that would mean is like we're not looking at what happens if we don't make it through selective school. We can actually look at the lead up to selective school, which is pretty important as well. So I guess if you're looking for good education, right? Your alternative pathways before selective is scholarship
Yeah.
or SEAL, or like I don't know, like some schools call it different, but like the public school extension classes.
Yeah.
Now, I think scholarship is always a nice path if you get one, but of course it is harder than selective because of the percentage. The percentage is lower.
Yep.
So that can be tricky. But again, like as I talked to Rocky earlier, you can always try for those. That's their good preparation beforehand as well.
Yeah.
In terms of SEAL, you do have to be a bit careful. So I think SEAL class, especially some SEAL programs like that I've looked at, some particular school SEAL programs are actually really strong as well and really good opportunities. The danger with SEAL, not really danger, but like something that you do have to consider if you're joining a SEAL class. I don't know about how strong like the best SEAL classes on the west side are, but like on the east side, you're looking at like Glen Waverley Secondary, McKinnon, Eastern Carteret. These schools with really good SEAL classes will lower your chance of getting into selective because of the 4% rule. So if you join one of these schools, you are taking a lower chance of entering selective. But of course, you have the safety net of if you don't enter, you're already at a good school, right?
Yeah.
So that's the trade-off that you have to consider. If your ultimate goal is just Mac Rob or Melbourne High, and that's like your number one goal, then you might not even want to join one of these top public schools. That will lower your chance, because like generally there's just going to be more than 4% of students that are really good, and they all want to leave for the most part. And then in terms of like what happens after, let's say you don't make it to selective school, because it is very competitive and it does happen, right? Even to the best, most prepared. Yep. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, yeah. Then a common path for these students is like, for example, John Monash, because at least the maths preparation is already kind of done. And you can try again the next year for the science schools because they're 1 year after. Right. And especially if like your child is not as good as English, then these science schools don't look at English at all. Right. While selective schools are actually 2/3 English, 1/3 maths. So it's like a big swing. So that would be like after selective. In terms of the AI question, I would say, let's say, I mean, education in general is maybe a bit broad, but I can talk about like in terms of how you can use it to prepare and like how you can use it for learning right now. I think there are some general things that it's really good at prepping. For example, I do tell students, for example, if you want to use AI to practice your vocabulary, that helps a lot because I feel like AI is very good at identifying when words are used incorrectly. Okay, like if you give it a sentence, even like just slightly, the context is a slightly incorrect, maybe the word that you use is a bit too over exaggerated, it can actually identify that and tell you. Okay, so it's really good for learning new words. At the moment, its limitations, at least for like preparation, is its reasoning is still really poor. At least in 2025, it has gotten a lot better than 2024. But if you feed it like quantitative questions with like pattern recognition, it's usually just giving you a really random answer with an explanation that makes no sense. At least I've tried it a lot myself to see what its limitations are right now. And same with mathematical problems. Like I think it's generally good if the problem's straightforward, but the more words there are, which these questions, like at least for selective, tend to have, like a lot of context, a lot of like small tricks in the question, like that's when it stumbles and it's not very good at solving. So I would say generally, I find it best for vocabulary. Its reading is actually also not bad, reading. And writing is okay to an extent, but you have to be careful when you're using AI for writing because one is at the moment, it's definitely better than a primary school writer. But when you go into upper secondary, we're looking at like generally the good like A+ writers are better than AI. And also they have really strange ways of writing that assessors don't like.
Okay.
You can almost feel like this weird way of describing. For example, like, I can give you an example, like in a narrative piece, I feel like AI is actually really good at this really flowery language. So if you don't know what you're doing, you might think, wow, this is great, right? What a great use of figurative language. But then a more experienced teacher who's marking it would actually think, oh, it looks nice on the surface, but it doesn't make as much sense contextually. And that's probably when they like realize, oh, it's AI. Or something else I noticed, which is students, like obviously schools right now still really hate when students use AI to write their piece. But also some students that train off AI. So they train off AI, so they don't actually use AI to write their work, but because they've learned all of their sentence structures and vocabulary of AI directly, and like they learned their similes and metaphors of AI as well, you can almost like feel that like they're almost like a half AI kind of person in their writing. And that can be like a disadvantage as well.
Yeah, cool. Just a follow-up question quickly. When they go to grade 12 and if they get a good ATAR scores, they get into a good universities, good courses. So if they have less scores and every score they have a cutoff, a higher range, will have very limited. So what they get good scholarship in those universities, and if they don't get into the good at our they get other courses, they don't get the good courses. So is it an understanding, or there's an alternative pathway for everything?
So you're saying if you don't get a good ATAR, can you still make it into certain courses? Is that kind of the question?
Yeah, correct. Yeah, like that. Yeah.
I think in Australia, it's actually very forgiving. ATAR is very forgiving in Australia. Like there's almost always a second chance. Like for example, like some countries, you might redo your year 12 sort of. Okay, but in Australia, it's kind of unheard of to redo your year 12. And that's because generally it's just a better idea to go to like TAFE or something. Okay, you do some kind of gap year something before you move into university, because you still can. And that applies to most courses, but I say most because some courses that are extremely competitive, like, medicine, like the #1 most competitive course in Australia, you tend to not really have that second chance as much. Like it's sort of there, but it's so slim that you kind of just want like, that high 99 ATAR straight in, or at least like 97-ish biomedicine, and then you try to work your way up from there. But, if it's other courses, like let's say you want to do even like engineering, which is like more in the lower 90s, like got a 70 or something, and that like made it so that you can't apply to any of the best universities for engineering. Generally, you can still like go to a I guess a lower ranked university that would probably take that, get a really good score in university, and transfer over. So there's always those chances in Australia.
All right, cool. Thanks, Dad. Thank you. Thank you so much.
No worries, Karthik. Question from Matt.
So what I wanted to ask about was just like I've been like going over my study schedule recently, and I'm not sure if I'm putting in enough time. Like if you want to get into a selective school, like a good grammar school, what would you say on average would a student require to study, like hours wise per day?
Okay. Well, that's a tricky question, because there's two factors I would say that also are really important other than study time, right? Which is how you study, because you can spend a lot of time and waste it. And then two would be like, how good are you already right now? Because like different people have different starting points, right? If you're starting off really behind, then you need to do a lot more work, right? But if you're already ahead, then you can do a lot less work. So #1 will be looking at how good are you already, right? Are you behind? Are you on average, like at the average year 6 or 7? Are you well ahead already, right? And then 2 is, do you use your time well? Okay, because if you use your time poorly, for example, like one easy example that I feel like everyone does at some point would be just getting into the mindset of, oh, I just need to do 50 practice questions a day or something, and you just like keep churning out 50, 50, 50, 50. But just doing like 50 a day is not necessarily good practice, right? If you go back and you learn one question, right? You even learn one question. That's better than just doing another 50 questions again and just like, getting the ones you already know correct, getting the ones you don't know wrong, right? Now, if you just want me to give you like a easy answer, I think if you're year 7 right now, are you year 7 right now? Is this Max Dunstan? It sounds like okay. Yeah, I kind of recognize your voice. But yeah, if you're like year 7 right now, Then you could probably do like 30 minutes to an hour of just like, you know, as I said earlier, right? You can practice some vocabulary, right? You start to learn some daily vocabulary. You start to practice some maths problem solving to try to build up those skills now, okay? Because it could be a very long process. And you can basically go as far as you want with those things. Once we do start the program, though, like intensive programs in like 2026, right? Generally, I think it takes like around an hour a day, okay, of just like work. And then you're trying to like do new questions and review at the same time. And it's really important that you're always like tracking what your strengths and weaknesses are so that you're not over studying your strengths, right? As well as like actually working your weaknesses. Because like a common trap that I've seen as well is just people that like to work on the strengths. It's just more fun working on your strengths, right? If you're really good at reading, it's more fun to do reading comprehensions, get some good scores, actually know what you're reading, rather than sit there and you feel like you've done a lot more, right? You can do 50 reading questions in an hour, or you could spend the whole hour working on 5 maths questions. But sometimes those 5 maths questions are going to help you a lot more, right? And I don't know if that helps you answer your question, Max. Do you have like a follow-up?
Just like just with the actual questions themselves, would you say like there are any pointers, like if you're like, let's say, doing a bunch of different questions, would you say there's any pointers to like recognize questions that you generically struggle with?
Yes, of course. I think you should.
A lot of my teachers like tell me like stuff like you say, like you need to practice the ones you don't know as much more, but the thing is it's kind of hard to recognize them immediately.
Yeah, I mean, what a good way to do that is to keep track of what you've gotten wrong, right? If you're keeping track of what you've gotten wrong, like Michael said, like he notes down every question that he's gotten wrong in a book, right? Then you start to see the kind of question that you get wrong very often, and you can work on that. Now, in addition to that, and I lost track of the point. I was thinking of something just earlier, but I kind of lost track of it. If I think of it later, I'll mention it again. But like, if you're keeping track of what question, the questions that you're actually getting wrong, then you should be able to build up like knowledge and better awareness of what you're actually getting incorrect. And something that does help would be like if we organize our questions by topic, then it's a lot easier to see what topics you're getting wrong. But sometimes like some people aren't actually weak at topics. Like, you know, like some people aren't weak at probability. Some people are weak at actually just understanding certain question types, where it's like not even about the topic itself, but rather just, I always misread this type of information when it happens. Like, for example, verbal reasoning. I always just mistake which one doesn't belong versus does belong in the set or something, right? And that's kind of like a different kind of practice altogether.
I do have a follow-up question. What if the questions you usually get wrong are like questions where like I call them silly mistakes? Like once you review them, you actually see like the answer is extremely clear. Like sometimes it's like something so simple, like it's an error in your calculations, like it's a very small difference, or you forget to round or misread. How would you get over those? Because I feel like I'll just give the AMC as an example. I feel like I get more questions wrong near the start than near like the last 5 questions, which are the harder ones, mainly because I
mean, silly mistakes are really annoying to deal with, right? Because it's so hard to work on and improve. But I think knowing what kinds of silly mistakes you make first goes a long way. All right. A common one might be like, not simplifying fractions or not checking units. Because like not simplifying fractions, I think is harder to like, you don't really make mistakes like that in multiple choice questions. But for example, not checking units is something that you can actually make mistakes in a multiple choice exam, right? When examiners put 0.5 cm as option A, but then like 0.5 millimeters as option C, just to see who didn't actually like read it carefully enough, right? If you know what weaknesses you are, what weaknesses you have, then something that can really help is actually writing out these things at the start of the exam, right? You can actually write out your common mistakes at the start of the exam as a reminder that these are the things you need to check over throughout the exam or at the end of the exam. So you can definitely try something like that, but silly mistakes are the hardest to work on, right? Versus just, I don't know probability, I need to study that.
Yeah, but what if you're in like a test where you can't really like try and pay attention to those? Like it's very like stiff on time. Like with the ones I do for mock tests, we have 60 questions in 30 minutes, which is like pretty generic.
Hmm.
You don't have a lot of time to finish a single particular question, like 30 seconds, and you
Hmm.
might spend all of your time just trying to look for a silly mistake, which
Yeah, so I think definitely don't overuse your time and like look for silly mistakes. You can underline certain parts of the question that are going to be important, keywords, units, all that. The actual question itself, like Kerry said, something that really helps with maths is like reading the end of the question first, right, to know exactly what you're looking for so that you don't actually misread something as well. If it's a really time pressured exam, for example, like how I mentioned quantitative exam this year, it is really hard. It's very hard to finish. The questions are really hard. But what that means as well is that you can get like 20 questions wrong and still do really well. So that's something as well, I think, Max, like let's say it'll be really good for you to work on these weaknesses from now for the next half of the year, right? But if you are unable to achieve it or something like that, right? Don't overstress yourself with your weaknesses, okay? Because with these selective school exams, you can get a lot of questions wrong. Again, I think that's something that like some good students sometimes fall into the trap of, which is just thinking, oh, I'm a 90% student, I need to get 90% of these right. When like 70% is a really strong score in some of these sections. Quantitative this year, I think around like, we don't have the exact scores, but like looking at the possible feedback, how many questions that people miss, like 50% seemed like a pretty strong score as well this year. Right. So don't overstress yourself with these weaknesses, but right now, definitely try to do things like, write out your weaknesses, underline keywords in the questions. Is that okay, Max?
Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. Matt. Yep. Yep. Oh, sorry, I can't hear you yet. Can't hear you. Can you check your mic? Yeah, sorry, we can't hear anything from the end. Do you want to type your question? Maybe you can just type your question in the chat. And I'll answer Ashi's question first. Yep. Yep.
Yeah, hi, Jaren. My question is around the cutoff percentage of students that are selected from each school. So I've heard that there's a 4% cutoff
Yes.
from public schools. So is the percentage a bit lower for grammar schools, or is it the same for grammar school as well?
Yep. It is 4% across all schools except the P-9 schools, or like like the schools that end in year 9. I don't know, like that kind of school, right? That those kind of schools get a higher percentage. Which I think from memory it's 10%, but it's like a very rare. Like those schools are pretty uncommon, right?
Okay.
But no difference between public and private. It's always 4%.
Okay, so my daughter is currently in a P9 school.
Yeah, okay.
She's in year 5, so a bit early. But for year 7, she has received an offer for the grammar school as well. So we wanted to let her try for selective. So, but we just don't want to decrease her chances for getting into selective if we choose the grammar option.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, there's a lot of factors. I don't know if you want to mention the grammar school specifically, but I can try to answer without knowing exactly which grammar anyways, right? For the P-9 school, there's a higher percentage, right? You have a higher percentage that can be accepted, but that's also because usually there's more competition because your whole grade has to leave, right? You don't have to leave in year 9, but like your whole grade is going to be sent off, right, to a new school anyways, right? So because of that, there's a lot of competition. Now, I don't know which exact P9, like if maybe you kind of know yourself, is it a very competitive P9? Is it really high rank?
So we are in West, it's Alamanda P9.
Okay.
And the grammar school we are looking in, it's the Bacchus Marsh grammar.
Okay. Yep. I have heard that Bacchus Marsh specifically is quite competitive.
Okay.
Is quite competitive. Now, I don't know how competitive Alamanda is, but they do have a higher percentage spot as well. So it's hard for me to compare, but I do think among the grammar schools, Bacchus Marsh is more competitive. And to help you out, like, so you can like kind of determine yourself a little bit, because like, it is easier if you're like in the area and you kind of know how strong your grade is, for example. Okay. But the reason why Bacchus Marsh has kind of like a decent competition is because the way you kind of tell how competitive a school is one, the public schools are more competitive just because you're not losing that kind of like really supportive environment that you expect from a private school, right? So because you don't lose that, you kind of just more people that are willing to just, why don't I just go to a better public school, right? And then in addition to that, for the private schools, it's how strong the private school is. And Bacchus Marsh is competitive because it sits at that kind of exact range where it's a decent school, but not so good that you rather stay there, right? Because like the highest, like most elite private schools, they tend to not actually have that much competition because the students rather stay in school. And so by choosing to stay, they give up the 4%. Like even if they get accepted, they give it up and pass it down to you, right? And so that's what makes like Bacchus Marsh quite a competitive school. Try to exit. And I heard this year, because there was a student that was at Bacchus Marsh. I think he said they were like, and this could be inaccurate, right? Because like students just hear from each other. But he said that there were around like 40 students that were trying for it. So, and then your final like, number is probably around like 10% of like for a school of like a bit above 200, like 250, 10 people.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, I'll answer Matt's question first. That was in the chat. So the question is, how do I effectively manage time during the exam? I did the selective school exam this year and had to guess some of the last questions, which is pretty fair. Also, since I'm quite solid in maths, when I try to study and do questions, I often get distracted and often skip these difficult and challenging questions. How do I avoid getting distracted at home when trying to study for scholarship selective exams? Okay, I mean, that's a good question from someone who actually tried the exam. Now, having to guess some of the questions is really normal. Especially like for this year, because it does change a bit. There's no fixed difficulty. But for example, like this year, the most difficult section was quantitative, just on average, right? And it was very expected that you would have to guess. Okay. Now, if you guess, it's okay, right? Because again, I do have pretty good kind of like confirmation that at least for like maths and reading, you would be able to at least get 10 questions wrong. Like for example, this year, 35 questions, 10 questions wrong. That's almost unacceptable for some top students, right? But that still puts you in the highest band. And how I can kind of guess that is from like a student that didn't even have time to guess and still got the top band, right? Because if you're guessing, I might think, oh, maybe you just got lucky guesses, but someone didn't even get time to guess at all and still got a top band, right? So that's how we know like, oh, you could get a lot of questions wrong and still be in the top band. So having to guess is completely fine, right? If you can be fully prepared and you still have to guess just because of how hard the exam's design is these days. In terms of like the other question, which I think is easier to like kind of answer, getting distracted with difficult questions, which is really fair, right? I kind of mentioned that like you like to practice what you're good at, right? And people don't like to practice what they're bad at because it feels like you're using the time much more ineffectively, right? You have to sit there for much longer to actually answer a question. And I think probably one thing you would want to do is don't jump straight to the most difficult questions, at least when you're working by yourself, right? When you're working by yourself, it sucks to like skip straight to the hardest questions, have no idea what's going on, give up, right? So start from easier questions. One thing I find that really helps is if you have the solutions, I am very for looking at solutions because I know some people are really against looking at solutions like, oh, I shouldn't look at it until I've done it, right? But if it's a really hard question, right, looking at a solution and working backwards can be a good way of like learning these difficult questions. It is really important that you do try to do it though, because this is the best practice, right? When you finally learn how to do a really hard question, that's much better than just getting 10 easy questions right? So trying to like keep the distractions away. I think, it could probably help to turn off your phone, okay? Because like the easier you are at getting distracted, the easier you are getting distracted, an easy like little notification about something that could like distract you really easily. So turning that off, getting rid of the phone is going to help a lot. Always start off easy, and towards the end, there are always challenging questions without answers. I mean, that's really tough if there's no answers. Okay, if there's no answers, okay, that sucks. I don't know what you can do in that case unless like you had, you get help from a teacher. But if you're doing self-practice, like answer booklets. No, questions about answers, like answer booklets. Do you mean like there's no solutions? There's no work solutions? There's no actual there's no multiple choice? There's no multiple choice in the questions? Like, what do you mean by no answers, without answers? Like it's not, so it is multiple choice, but what do you mean by there's no answer? Like it's not open-ended answers. Okay. So if the answer is not included in booklet, so like it's just that you don't have the answer, right? That's just it, right? The questions, they didn't give you answers to the booklets. Yeah, so I think if that actually happens, that's very unfortunate. Okay, if you're just given really hard questions, you have no answers because no one gave you answers, and you have no one to ask. All right, in that case, you know, this is the worst case scenario. You've been given a book, you have no answers, you have no one to ask. Okay, what would I do in that situation? Okay, probably, and this is like not a great answer for you, but I'll probably just put it aside because like if you have no answers, you have no one to ask, what can you do with this question, right? Maybe better to just leave this question behind rather than think about it for 2 hours, get nowhere, right? There's two things I'll say here. One is those AMC problems that I told the other person about, sorry, I forgot your name, but like those AMC questions, usually if you're like searching up maths, I assume it's like maths because maths has the most really difficult problems, which are like, you feel like they're unsolvable, okay? But like those old AMC papers always have work solutions, all right? Especially if you look at the American AMCs, so many people, it's a really big exam, so many people do full YouTube videos explaining the questions. So if you're working through those problems, especially like self-study, that's why I like them for self-study problems, you always get to see work solutions and try to like work it out from there. And there's always more than one work solution as well. So if one uses knowledge that you haven't learned yet, you can go to another work solution and have a look, right? Have a look at those American AMC problems. And the other one is, you know, hopefully in another year or two, you'll be able to ask ChatGPT, but not right now, okay? Right now, if you can't do the math problem, it's too hard, it probably can't do it either. Like it just spews out some random answer that makes no sense. But yes, it's not very satisfying. I feel like it's not that satisfying, but you know, if you have no teacher, no one gives you the answer, then what can you do with a problem that's just sitting there? I have a question from someone typed a question about where you can ask questions. I think if you still have questions, feel free to like message one of the school admins, okay, any of the admin chats on WeChat if you have WeChat. And if you don't, you can always email as well. I think all of you should at least have an email of the school somewhere. You can go to the website to get contact information as well. You know, email WeChat. You can always like email WeChat to school, and someone will try to help you out if you have any questions about anything. Okay, so Alex.
Hi, my daughter is in year 7 at Bowen High SEAL class already, and we're thinking whether to take the exam for McRob next year, and just wondering about the difference in programs and the competition as well, and
Yes.
your opinions on Bowen High SEAL.
Yeah. Now, is Bowen High SEAL class, if I remember correctly, is quite interesting because some SEAL classes end at year 9, which means you lose the advantage. But if I remember correctly, if you can just correct me, they extend that later. In fact, they actually do another exam to like to sort students into better classes in around the year 9 level. Did they do that?
So they study a year ahead.
Yeah.
And then by end of year 9, you are already done year 10. And so year 10, 11, 12, you're doing 3 years VCE.
Okay, yeah. I think here's the thing. So number one is Bowen High is would be considered one of the hardest schools to go to selective school because you are in the top, the top public school bracket, which is the hardest to get out of. That's the most number of like people actually trying to get out and like basically block you in the 4%. Two, like in terms of like whether or not you want to go for it, I guess first of all, you can always try it first, right? You can always try it first, see where you're at, and then you can decide later. But also, if it's in terms of like VCE, right? I would probably think, and I have this opinion without, I didn't go to Bowen High, but like kind of general understanding of these kinds of public schools and the SEAL programs, that their year 9 will probably be at least as good as McRob, maybe better. like the year 9 itself, just year 9 itself, like if you're in the year 9 accelerator program, right? Hard to say completely. Sometimes you get a bad teacher. I would say at least these public schools, they always give you the best teacher they have for the advanced class. But MacRob, you might be rolling, like trying to roll for a good teacher by chance. But in terms of like VCE, like once you hit the VC level, I think these selective schools will give you a better chance than, let's say, Bowen High's SEAL, because you're not even in the SEAL class anymore, right? And the reason why is because in VC, a lot of it actually comes down to your peer group, right? Like your peer group in VC actually affects more than just study groups, because some people think, oh, I'm surrounded by good people, I can study better, which is a valid reason. But something else that's a consideration is the VCE actual calculation system is adjusted based on your school as well. Okay, so like if your school does really well together, you get adjusted upwards. Now, as long as your school is not that bad, usually it might not matter. So if you just at a decent school, you're doing really well at school, you do really well in your exam, you should be able to get really good marks. But something that like these top schools kind of give you a little buffer is because your class is so strong, if you slip up on the exam, you can be boosted up, like you can get like a little boost as well. Now, the way that works is simply because like, for example, if you guys, I don't know how much of you guys understand, but especially parents of like, primary school kids, you don't have to research this at all. But if you get like let's say 70% at school, okay, 70% at school, what the VCAR body does, the VC, the people that run VC, right, is if your school does really well, let's say like these 70% students at your school score 90%, and that might not be you, maybe you don't get the 90%, but all your other friends that got 70% at school got 90%. What that does is they look at that result and they think, oh, your school's internal exams were really hard, and they give you a boost. Okay. And that's what kind of helps. Like, that's why you kind of see like certain schools always get these like really high achievers and some schools never get it. And that's partly because, oh, maybe you just never, like some schools just never get a really, really high achieving student. But also partly it's because it's actually really hard to stand out if you're a very top student at not a very top school, right? Like you have to have everything going for you to try to really stand out. And what I mean by really stand out would be like a top 99 score, okay? Like if no one else at your school is even 95 and you're trying to get a 99 score, it is really hard because of this school scaling system. So I'd say if you're like if you're considering VC, I think going to MacRob will help you get a really high, like especially if you're aiming for the really high 99 plus ATAR, will be easier than Bowen High. And that's just what I generally think about these two considerations. But yeah, I know Bowen High's teachers and programs are not bad as well. I'll just quickly answer a few easy questions in the chat. One was about, okay, answer the one that says like, how can we ask more questions? A student said, okay, there was a question, would Melbourne High be suitable for, a very gifted IQ student? I would say probably, like it depends on exactly what you mean by that and what school you're comparing against, okay? Because there's certain private schools that can probably help you even better, like would help with a very gifted, student, one of those like maybe like 5 grades ahead kind of student. Like a private school could maybe like do some shuffling, put you in an advanced class, which like these public schools don't, even if you're in selective. But if you compare it to like another school that doesn't really have any additional programs, going to Melbourne High is pretty decent because you'll meet a lot of people that are excelling in a certain area, like sometimes not just academic, but like whether it's there's a lot of extremely high achieving sports students or even art students there as well. Okay, but I'm not in a great position to answer that particular one. And there was a question about there's a question about IB, which sorry I can't answer because I don't know as much about IB, like the specificities. I have a question, what about Box Hill High? I don't know if you can I'll answer Tamid's question first, but I don't know if you can elaborate, are you talking about you go to Box Hill High and what grade you're in? But Tamid's question is, if I've gotten bad grades from the start of the year until now, and I really want to get into Melbourne High or selective school, will this affect me if they do see my scores? What can I do? Okay, so number one is, if you get in through the normal rounds, it does not affect you at all. Okay, selective schools, unlike private schools, they're not going to look at your report, right? Scholarships, they do want to look at your report. So even if you do really well in your test, right, if your report is terrible, that could affect you. Academic, I think it affects you less than behavior. If you get a bad behavior report, that's a lot worse than a bad academic report, because at least you can explain, oh, I've improved a lot since then. Selective school, first round, second round, third round, fourth round, they will not even look at your report basically at all. It's like the only consideration is that exam score. Okay, is that exam score. If you get a principals round, okay, then that report does matter. But I wouldn't say that just because you did really badly in year 7, got some bad grades, that's going to really affect you, right? Especially if you can turn it around, right? You have a chance to explain yourself if you get an interview, principal's interview round, especially because they first invite you before you even have to show your report, right? And then you have to show your report. So you can probably twist it around, talk about how the efforts you've made, the improvements you've made, the mentality change, and all that. Like, it could be a great opportunity for you to talk about how you've turned things around. So I definitely wouldn't say that bad grades in year 7 is a problem in terms of the report card. What it is a problem for instead is that if you are actually really behind in your maths and English, that will really affect your chances, right? If you're actually really bad at English and maths. But if, for example, you say you have a bad report card, but it's because it's science not being tested, right? It's because you had bad attitude in sports, right? Is it because you didn't try? If you didn't try, it sounds easy to improve, but again, like, even, you know, mentality and efforts, like trying to improve that can be quite challenging. You should start right now, right? I'll move on to the next question, but if you want to if you want to elaborate, you can, about like what the bad grades are. Is it because you didn't try hard enough, or is it because you actually struggle with the content being taught at school? There's a question about, okay, I'll go back to the Box Hill High question, which is year 7. You're in Box Hill High, year 7, not in the GAP program. That can be tricky because, you know, generally it's the Box Hill High GAP kids. In case you don't know what this is, the Box Hill High GAP kids is the Box Hill High SEAL classes, right? The extension class. So if you're not in that class, and you're actually, I guess, behind those kids, then it can be really hard, because generally, like, Box Hill High students that make it through are going to be from that class, right? Because they made it into that class for a reason. That usually means they're quite ahead. That could also mean they're better at taking exams, you know, because you have to take an exam to make it into that class in the first place, right? So definitely tricky. I would say it's also pretty hard because, you know, again, it's a decent public school. Even worse so, it's not exactly one of the top public schools either, like as top as I would say, you know, like McKinnon, one of the Doncasters, Bowen, right? Which means even more people want to try to, you know, take the exam. And so what's the actual question though? It's just like the question was just, what about Box Hill? So is there anything you want to say, like what do you have to do? Was the question just what are the chances? What do you have to do? Well, I think what you can do is you can definitely, you definitely need to start working on your English and maths. Probably English even more so, because there are students that can get in with good English, but if you're only good at maths, you almost have no chance. You can't, in fact, I can actually just say you have no chance. If you do well in maths but poorly in English, like poorly, not average, poorly, it's not going to work out, right? So you definitely want to start like doing all the preparation that we talked about earlier. The really tricky thing about Box Hill High specifically is I can't even say that, oh, maybe your GAP students, right, your accelerated students, maybe they're not going to be used to the selective school format, because I would say Box Hill High is one of the most similar to selective school entry tests, right? Box Hill High uses the Haas test. At least for your grade, it would have been the Haas test. I don't know if they switched to Edu-Test this year because I heard rumors about that. But if they use the Haas test for your grade, that's a very similar test to the selective school, which means that, you know, those GAP students in your school did well at a test that's very similar to selective school, which means they're probably pretty well off in terms of like taking a selective school exam. So you would want to like start preparing early and consistently and making sure that you really use your practice time well, right? Like not just practicing questions you already know, not doing really unfocused practice, putting a YouTube video in the background, you know, that sort of thing. But it would just be a lot of the things that we already talked earlier. And if for the question about like, you know, how hard it's going to be, it's definitely going to be challenging if it's Box Hill High and you're not yet in the GAP class. Can I see this question? Okay, so follow-up question from the person before, which is what's the difference in the rounds and principal round thing? Okay, So the rounds is basically like first round, they just take, all the schools just pick the best students. Okay, basically just all the students get ranked, all your scores get ranked from best to last out of like the 5,000 people that did the exam, right? And the schools just get their pick. Usually what that means is the better students go to Melbourne High MacRob, and then the worst, not worse, you're still like top 10, okay, top 10%, like you get like a Nossel Suzanne Corey offer, but not necessarily, because some really top students pick Nossel or Suzanne Corey because they live nearby usually. That's why they pick those schools. And then after that, right, each round, the students drop out because there are many students that decide not to go, right? Some private school students just go for the test. They take the offer just to negotiate a scholarship, right? Some students pick, let's say, especially like Nossel, Suzanne Corey, but then they get offered Melbourne High. So like the offers get shuffled up, you know, like they pass these offers to, like they pass the Melbourne High MacRob offers to Nossel students, and then like students that didn't get an offer yet get the Nossel offer, and so on. So the first, second, third, fourth round is literally just every week or 2 months, even so, like the time periods are really different, but they will just release a new cycle of offers. Like after people have rejected offers, they pass it down the ladder to the next person. The principals round is different because it's not about the scores altogether, right? They're basically choosing students that have like just missed the cutoff or have like, sometimes they miss the cutoff by a lot, but because they notice that you have some kind of situation, okay, then they will invite you for the principals round thing. So the difference with the principals round is factors other than your selective school academic achievement matters, right? Including like other academic achievements that you've made, right? You can say, I had a bad day that day. Okay. Factors including sport, right? They might look at your sport. Factors including challenges that you've faced. Maybe you've been facing some long-term illness and you've been battling that and you want to show that like you're really resilient, all that, right? They're looking at those factors. That's the main difference if you make it through principals round, that those factors get included. Is there a practice test for selective as this time for year 7s? There are some. I will say there's not a lot these days because most like practice tests that you can find online are old edu tests, just because we had like over a decade of like edu tests. Like, so a lot of the practice tests you find online are actually edu test based. I believe like we will run our first practice in January just as like a warm up, see where people are at, sort of exam. And then we do run practice like full mock exams, like where you spend half the day at our office to do all the exams throughout the year next year. But I think we're going to run one in January. In terms of, you know, the other practice tests, you can find some online, but the only problem is that a lot of them are still outdated. Do we need to apply for principals round? Okay, you don't need to apply for principals round. You simply just get selected. This year it was between round 3 and 4, I believe. It was like really weird. Like usually principals round is the final after all of the standard rounds have been completed. But this year was after round 3. They did the principals round first, and then they went to 4th round, which is strange. But yes, you don't apply. They just select you. Is there anything else? Any drop in rate from selective due to pressure? I don't know if you mean by class, like in terms of like, oh, selective school preparation classes, do people drop out due to pressure? I think not from pressure, but like it is a rare case, but there have been people that drop out sometimes because you know, some students do selective school preparation for scholarship, for example. So they've been dropouts due to scholarships. Okay, like there was a scholarship test before the selective, they got in, they're out, right? That happens. And sometimes I think some students, instead of pressure, it's more about just like they feel that they're not really ready. But I think if that's the reason, it's not the best reason, because there's no harm in failing, you know, like there's no harm in failing if you're going to go for it anyways. But yes, like I think very rarely, maybe like one a year, I don't know if that's what you're talking about, like one a year within like our own classes, maybe someone drops due to the fact that they just feel underprepared and they don't want to like keep working at it anymore. But I think it's always worth to keep working at it, because one is, even if you don't make it, a lot of people that at least try for it have a massive boost in their day school just level of maths and English. Unfortunately, not in the other subjects because that's not the focus. But like anyone that's like gone through the full process and worked hard will show like a big jump in maths and English, just generally. Question for, which is, what is the criteria for a student to be invited to the principals round? It's generally just students that barely missed out the cutoff. right? They're looking at students that barely missed out the cutoff. Sometimes they will pick out students that actually missed the cutoff by quite a bit. And usually that might be like students that missed out by quite a bit. But what I mean by quite a bit is still not like bad. Okay, these students have to still be above average, but maybe they see on your initial application. So like in the principals round, you're asked to provide a lot more information. But even before the principals round, they know what school you've been to, for example, what school you go to currently. So if they see a student that's like kind of above average out in a very disadvantaged rural school, like that could be a student that gets invited for a principals round. Okay, because they think, wow, you managed to achieve those results while having a lot of other disadvantages. Yep, and this is a question from another person that's similar. So they won't see any of your grades in the rounds, but only in the principals one they will. Yeah, so they don't take into any other, like they don't take your grades into any consideration, like your school grades. And in the principals round, it's not that they like see your grades, but rather they'll ask for your information. So that's when you probably show your school report. That's what you're worried about. But again, I don't think that's a big issue, right? Because number one, most people don't make it through principal rounds. It's like a really rare offer in terms of like the percentage. It's like 10% of people get a principals round offer. So most people, will never have to provide any other information. But two, again, if you were able to get a principals round, that means you actually did quite well. So you would be able to easily explain like, the growth process you've had, the improvements you had, the mentality shifts you've had, okay? And I think you can easily turn it into a strength, like how you went from poor year 7 grades to getting a principal's offer. No, you don't provide info before they invite. So basically, they invite students to apply for the principal's round. And then I think Michael was able to talk about that a bit more. In a bit more detail. So if you want to see the details again, maybe you missed it earlier, but like you can watch this recording, just rewind back to when Michael was talking about it because he got one of those offers this year. But they will invite you to add information. So they'll invite you to provide additional information, and they basically just invite, like, I think this year they invited quite a few. I mean, the exact numbers are not public, but just based on like how many people, like, we know that got invited, it seemed like they invited a lot of people to apply for the principals round. And then after that, they choose from there. So they basically choose to invite you based off your score mixed with the information they already know, like what school you go to. But then once they invite you is when you actually fill in, like you have to write a essay about yourself. You have to give like other awards and achievements you've made, okay, and reference letters, all that. The Zoom recording, I think either we'll send it out like to any participants today, or we might just publish like a public link. Okay. The other students said that they look at your grades thoroughly. I mean, maybe in the principals round, but definitely not in like the first round. Like they don't have that information at all. First round, second round offers, like the only factor is your result that you achieved on that day. And of course, the 4% rule. The result you achieved on the day, did you get cut off by 4%? Okay, last few. Okay, no worries. Thanks, Kev. Thanks. All right. So that's the end of all the questions in the chat. All right, I got no more there. So thanks for coming today. Thanks for the students that sat here till the end. Okay, you really didn't have to, but thanks for sharing your insights. And yeah, so question, is there a threshold if you're 4%? If you are 4%, I don't fully get the question. Is there a threshold if you are 4%? Is there a threshold? I'll say you are with, yes. Oh, okay, yeah. So you don't automatically get an offer of your top 4% in your school, right? It's about being the top 4% in your school, of the entire school, by the way. So if you have like 10 students doing the exam, but you have 200 in your school, you still have 8 spots. Okay, so only 2 people get cut off. But you also have to meet the base requirement score. So like how it's really done is all the students that did the exam are ranked, okay, from highest to lowest score. And then they basically send out offers and skip you if they've already sent out offers to 4% of your grade. Right? So they send out the offers starting from like rank 1, like highest scoring student. And then they just keep sending offers and they skip anyone who goes to a school that they've already sent out offers to 4% of the grade. Right? So you do have to be within 4% and you need to reach the score required. Okay, so you can't get a bad score but be in the top 4% of your school. So many schools will not reach this 4%. right? There's a big divide. Like there's a lot of schools that break the 4% like way over the top. Maybe there's 10% of students that reach the score, but other schools, just zero, like 0 students made it. Like maybe some students try to go for it, but no one actually made the baseline score that year. And so there's just no offers. Yeah. Oh, the baseline score is not public. Okay, because like Sydney publishes these scores, but we don't get those scores. So generally, it's just, are you ranked within the top whatever number of students they can accept, which is usually around like 900-ish across all schools. But like, Melbourne High accepts like around that 300 mark, and MacRob's accepts around that 200. So for example, like, let's say, to simplify things, like let's say every girl actually wanted to go to MacRob, which is not exactly true, right? Some people put the other schools as first preference. But if every girl wanted to go to MacRob, then they would just send out offers to the first 200, like the top 200 scores, and the baseline score that year would just be who achieved that top 200 score. But generally, it won't be 200. Let's say the baseline score was the top 270 girls, because 70 of them got cut off by the 4% that year, right? And then so that would be like the base score that you had to reach that year. I don't know if that makes sense. So no particular baseline score. They're not like, oh, you need 70%, 72% this year, right? It's just about the ranking. Were you top 200, if you want to make it to this particular school? Yeah. Okay. I mean, if that's all for today, then I guess we can end it here. Now, if you still have another question, it's all good. You can always forward these questions through WeChat or email. And we can reply afterwards. So don't worry if we couldn't answer your question, or you still, you think of something else afterwards. Okay.
Okay, Darren, if there's no more questions, we can just finishing up because it's really long night for everyone. And thank you so much, everyone, for joining tonight's seminar. And if you do have any other questions, please send through your questions to info@ecudemic.com.au. And Darren, myself, and all our lovely students will be more than happy to share our experience and ideas with you and helping your child to succeed. Okay? All right. Darren, do you have anything you want to say?
No, I think that's all from me.
Okay, all right. So thanks again, everyone. And also thank you for all our lovely students, and wish everyone have a lovely night. Okay, thank you so much. See ya.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay, all right. Bye. Thank you, Darren. Thank you so much.